Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's 10 o'clock and I'm chairing the Council Process Committee of May the 17th, and we have one item only on the agenda, and so we would like to have an approval of that.
Moved.
Council Whitmer.
Second.
Seconded by Margaret, Council Kunst. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I'm in favor, of course. And so I think Ms. Bauer is going to give us just a little recap of where we are here, but and I can make some comments too. I've been studying what we've got. We have a motion or a policy in front of us that hasn't been given any readings yet. It was deferred to this meeting. But Ms. Bauer, would you like to introduce the session for today? Thank you.
Okay. There we go. So I'm just going to provide a quick recap on what we have done with this bylaw. Starting with the final report from the local general election in November 18th, 2018, the chief election officer recommended improvements to the election and political sign bylaw due to the tremendous amount of township resources that were spent on dealing with election signs and responding to the many public complaints. The recommendations provided included a shorter duration that the election signs would be erected and a monetary penalty for signs placed in contravention of the bylaw and picked up by township staff. On January 21st, 2020, staff provided an amendment bylaw for council discussion that addressed the suggestions from the chief election officer, as well as prohibiting reflective tape and stickers on election signs, limiting the placement of election signs in and around school district sites to be equivalent to the limitations on township sites, further refinement of placement of signs on the township property, and a deposit and pickup fee for sign placement when signs were placed in contrary to the bylaw or issues of public safety. Following council discussion, council adopted a resolution to refer the potential amendments for the bylaw to a future CPC meeting. On November 30th, 2020, prior to the school district by-election, council adopted an amendment to the election and political sign bylaw that reduced the days that the election sign could be placed to 21 days prior to general election day. As it was thought at the time that the CPC referral that this was not a time-sensitive matter until closer to the 2022 local general election, and council had identified more time-sensitive issues, this topic remained behind others for discussion. During council's recent strategic planning meeting, facilitated by Dr. McIntosh, council directed that this item be first on the CPC agenda topic list. And that brings us to today.
Excellent. Thanks, Ms. Brown. Now, there's a hand coming up, but you referenced the November the 18th, 2018 report that sort of initiated the changes. I wonder if that I don't see that in the package. Was that not included in the package, or if I missed it?
No, that was the final report from the 2018 general election, and there were only two recommendations in that related to the political sign bylaw, and that was the time that they would be up, which council addressed later in 2020, and the time and finding structure for signs that are placed in contravention of the bylaw. And those two are the only ones that were there.
Is it possible to have that report circulated during the meeting, or is that too much to ask?
Sure, not a problem. I can have that done.
All right, so Councillor Richter, you're first up.
Yes, I think having seen what Surrey's done, we should be following Surrey's example and just banning signs completely in the township. They are an environmental problem, and they're also a drain on bylaws and staff resources throughout the election. And Surrey's election seemed to have proceeded quite effectively. They got a council elected, a school board elected, etc., by restricting all the signs to private property and none whatsoever on the public boulevards. So that would be my number one choice, and then we don't have to put in a $500 fee, which I think is somewhat of a limiting factor on candidates being able to participate, to slap on a fee like that, even though it is refundable after the fact. And failing the Surrey model, then I would suggest the Langley City model is probably quite appropriate, but that would be my second choice. I think we should just move away from this reliance on political signs, physical political signs in an election. I think we've got electronic tools that make signs unnecessary now. Thank you. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, so council's diving right in there already, which is great, but I just wanted to sort of set the tone for where we're at. So, Ms. Bauer, this motion from January the 21st, it was moved and seconded and then referred to this meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So we can either modify or we have to deal somehow with this report, and that's attachment C in your package that has already prepared some of these changes.
Well,
So
point of order, Mr. Chair, the motion is wide open. Doesn't it say that staff bring forward the necessary bylaw changes to restrict the erection of signs? Like it's wide open. We could,
At this point, because it's been referred, it is wide open. Council can choose to make amendments, send it back, direct staff not to proceed, and we continue with the bylaw as it is.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to restrict where we're going to go from here. I'm just trying to lay a basis as how we got here. So this report is in front of us, so we can rewrite it today, we can amend it, we can pass it, we can reject it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why what I would like to do, I would like to change it to say follow the Surrey model.
Okay,
and that's the amendment that I would put on. But in keeping with the practice that the mayor has established in other meetings, I think we should give everybody a fair chance to comment before we start in with amendments.
And do we have a very descript of the Surrey model? Do we have that directly? I know that we have a couple of boxes on that graph, but I don't think we have the whole bylaw from Surrey. So that's another issue. Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to, before I get into asking questions, I know we've got a couple hours for this meeting, but I wanted to ask the housekeeping question, if I may, through the chair. How does this affect provincial and federal elections?
Yeah, good question.
Through the chair.
Ms. Bauer, could you answer that?
At this time, our political and sign bylaw does cover provincial and federal signs. Provincial and federal election signs are actually regulated through local governments. So if we could change the bylaw to which suits council.
So whatever bylaw council comes up with, provincial and federal have to follow, which was different than a few years back, because I remember that they broke all of our bylaws and we couldn't do anything about it. But has that changed then, Ms.
Bauer? That's one of those questions that is a yes and a no. At this time, they do follow the council's or the local government's bylaw. But of course, the provincial and federal governments both also have paramount seats. So should they choose not to, you're correct, there's not much we can do.
And would they be?
Well,
Sorry,
Mr. Chair, I just want to finish. Thank you. This is like a housekeeping question because this has always lingered. Because I know that the last provincial and federal election, I just use Surrey as an example. There is a lot, even though they've made changes, there is a lot of signs everywhere in that community. Anyway, just a point. I just wanted a clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just to follow up on that, it's an interesting that you brought it up, Councillor Ferguson. So would they have to pay, if we pass this $500 thing, for example, would a provincial or federal candidate have to pay that as well?
It would still be in our bylaw and within our purview to charge it. And again, should the province or the federal government decide to invoke paramountcy, then we wouldn't be in a position to do anything.
All right. And I do see in attachment A.
Well, Mr. Point of information, Mr. What was the word that the clerk used? Provoke something or other?
Yeah, what's that word?
Paramountcy.
Paramounting?
Paramountcy. It simply means that their legislation comes ahead of ours, should they choose to say that.
Yeah, paramount C. C, it stands for
CY, yeah.
creature. Remember, we're creatures of the province. Okay. All right. So in attachment A, there is, Councillor Richter, I stand corrected, a description of what Surrey does in the last column. No city right-of-way, sidewalks, boulevards, medians, not on any public property, no highway. So, but what Councillor Ferguson's pointing out is that even though they had that in, provincially and federal, the last provincial election, they seem to ignore that. Is that right?
I
Councillor
did not see any evidence of that abuse during the last federal election, none whatsoever, or the provincial election. In fact, Surrey was refreshingly
sign free.
non-sign polluted driving through it.
Councillor Whitmarsh, you can add to this conversation. You're muted at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure on what the bylaw is in the city of Langley. The document that we have in front of us, the table, doesn't seem to have too many limitations in the city of Langley, but I understood that the limitation was that there was only a couple of select public areas that allowed signs to be placed, and they were all sort of placed in the same area. So if you drove by those areas, you'd see about 100 signs sitting in one small location. But that doesn't say that in our table. The table that we have here actually just indicates no balcony, no flashing signs, no billboards, no roofs. Other than that, it doesn't limit it, it seems, in the city of Langley. So I don't know if we're missing something or if I misunderstood the way the bylaw was being functioned in the city of Langley previously. So maybe through the chair, maybe there might be a response about what is happening in the city of Langley and if we're missing some information.
Thank you. Ms. Bauer, or whoever. Yeah, my understanding is there's two locations.
Yeah, I believe Councillor Woodward is right, or Councillor Whitmarsh is right. I can just do a quick search and see if I can find that on their website.
Yeah, it seemed to me there was a spot up on 200 by the right-of-way, right? The power right-of-way is where the city would allow them.
And there was another spot that seemed to be near the Gateway of Hope.
Yeah, so there were two locations from my recollection, but Ms. Bauer is going to verify that. So in other words, it should also say no city right-of-way, sidewalk, boulevards. I mean, just like Surrey, except for these two locations.
Yeah. So just a general thought I have is that, you know, I think there's certainly we have a lot of signs and we could argue that there's too many signs being posted. On the other hand, I still think there is a need for signs currently. That might not be the case in the future, I don't know, but currently there's a lot of people that don't use social media as their primary source of information. There are some that do, but there's lots that don't. And I also think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that we need to create the most democratic context for the election that we can. And it's always challenging when an existing council is making decisions on what should be done for signs for future people running. And we know that incumbents do tend to have a bit of an advantage just by name recognition. And so for us putting in rules that limits what new people might be able to do is a challenge. So I'm not saying we shouldn't. I just think we need to make sure we balance off what is to make sure that we have the most democratic process we have and we can have and allow people the opportunity to do that. So however we do that, and maybe some restrictions are helpful. I noticed that one of them, I don't know how they measure it, but Maple Ridge limits it by, you can only make 300 signs maximum. That's an interesting, I don't know how they actually regulate that, but that was an interesting thought that you have a maximum number of signs you can produce of any size at any kind, anywhere that you post. So maybe that's helpful too, I don't know. But anyways, I just think there's a balancing act between making a democratic election and making sure we don't have too many signs out there.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson, you're next.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm next on the speakers list, but in any event, it's a good segue, actually. Thank you for acknowledging me.
I apologize because it doesn't automatically tell me. Mayor
Oh, that's, well, that's okay. I think maybe Margaret and I were sort of at the same time.
Mayor Frost, you just have to write it down, I guess.
Okay. In any event, it's good timing. I wanted to use a segue for what Councillor Whitmarsh is saying. I believe, of course, it's important to get together and have a couple of hours worth of discussion about things that have been brought forward and have examples from other communities around us. But it bothers me, actually, that we haven't considered, I believe, having an arm's length committee to look at these options. I think best management practices that we use as a guideline for other situations would be highly advisable in a situation where, in fact, inherently, through no fault of our own, we're in a conflict of interest. So whether or not we try as best we can to minimize the degree to which we are compromising a number of individuals' opportunities to be successful in the next election, I think that, you know, for me, I don't see that this is a huge rush that we have to make these changes. And I think that rather than just looking at piecemeal what other communities are doing and kind of picking and choosing what options we might like, I don't think that that's a very successful or positive way to go about it. And so I really strongly feel that we should not be doing this ourselves. And in fact, we should have an arm's length committee that makes recommendations. We still get to choose in the end, but I think that taking it away from us would probably be more transparent than allowing ourselves to continue in this process. So those are my concerns about what we're doing at this time. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. So I'm making a list of some suggestions. There's two so far where we can hit to. And I do apologize, Councillor Quince. I'm going to write down because I thought it was going to be the person, you know, the hand that's on the left is always first, but it moves around. So you have the floor now.
Totally fine. It's totally fine. So I just was thinking along the lines of, I appreciate what Councillor Arneson was saying, because yeah, I kind of feel the same. It's a little bit like we're making decisions for future council members. You know, I guess one of the thoughts I had was, I mean, we definitely need to rein in the whole sign thing for sure, because seeing signs plastered all over Kingdom Come is not, you know, I don't think anybody, you know, really wants to do that. If we were to potentially limit the number of signs and then limit the streets that those signs could be on, so take them out of those rural areas where a lot of those signs get blown into fields and you know, sometimes people can't, you know, find them back. And just, you know, sort of narrow it down to maybe, you know, Fraser Highway, 200th Street. I don't know. We can talk about, you know, which streets those, which might be of benefit for people to see that there is an actual election going on, but, you know, not have them all over the township of Langley. So, you know, just thought I'd throw those comments out there.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can throw, if I had to put my hand up, I would have done it now. The thing that makes township unique is a geographical layout, right? Well, 100 and whatever it is square miles, 150 square miles. And so so geographically, we're really spread out. So that is different from Langley City in a huge way and different than Surrey. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, back to me now. Well, I did the housekeeping question already, and that's an interesting answer. This depends on who wants to flex their muscle, provincially or federally. I guess if a whole bunch of fines started coming in, that would raise some interesting questions in the ire of others. Okay, so that's neither here nor there. That's something we'll have to address down the road. You know, the number of days the last council just about got it, and I think that you just missed the 21 days. I think went further. I think we went almost a month or something, whatever the sign was, 28 days or something. So less days, that's a good idea. And our bylaw isn't all that bad right now as it is, not in medians and not in 20 or 30 feet or something, whatever it is from the intersections. That's good. Basically, putting more on private property, that's good. So we have a pretty good bylaw right now. So basically, I really would hate to take away the opportunity for others. That's an opportunity for others that wish to run. It seems that incumbents may or may not have an advantage if everybody's not allowed to put signs up. Sometimes I have to remind my neighbors who I am by putting a sign up. Also, as we've done in the past, past councils have done, reminds me a bit of the remuneration bylaw for council members. And that is to put it over, to make a decision and put it over to the next council where we're not voting upon ourselves. So this could be something that we would go through the process of finding the right information and the right terms as, I don't know if I totally agree with this bylaw, but as amended the bylaw coming forward and then putting it to the next, I guess would be the 2025, I think it's 2025 or 2026, I guess it's 2026 council to implement it. Anyway, those are my suggestions.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I would have preferred a committee as well to sort of take care of this, following up Councillor Arneson. I'm not sure there's time to do that unless we're just simply going to allow the bylaw to stand for the next couple of elections. My biggest issues are not so much worrying about where signs go or trying to restrict people's signage onto specific roadways. I think that will create problems of a different nature. There's always going to be an advantage for some candidates over others based upon certain things. There's going to be some campaigns that are going to be really good at signs, and they're going to litter them literally everywhere, which we saw in the last provincial election. I've never seen so many signs. So I think that there's, no matter what we do, someone's going to benefit and someone's going to be hurt by it. If we restrict signs, that will help lower funded candidates. If we have a free-for-all for signs like we do right now, it will benefit those that spend the maximum. So we can debate all day who's benefiting and who's not benefiting, and I think that would be appropriate to go to a third-party group. I don't know who that would be. Probably ends up being some of our friends. So I don't really know how any committee will be impartial. It'll just be accused of the same shenanigans probably. So I don't know if how practical that's actually going to end up in a real world setting. My biggest issue was enforcement. So whatever bylaw we have just simply isn't being enforced. You can go around and report it, and 3 days later, that same sign is still sitting there. Either bylaw is busy focusing on more important issues, or there's so many sign complaints, they only get to so many per day. Whatever the reason is, somebody reports a sign, 3 days later, it's still there. 4th day, it's gone. 5th day, it's back again, because the campaigns just go put it back up again. And, I'm referring to T intersections down here on Glover Road, quite common to see that. It'll be put up, removed, put up, removed, put up, removed. And unless there's some mechanism to extract some kind of penalty for that, why have a bylaw at all? Because it's clearly not going to be followed by some campaigns, while other campaigns are going to follow the bylaw. So people that play by the rules lose out. People that are willing to do literally anything, put signs literally anywhere, are going to benefit. And so I think for me, if we're not discussing enforcement, we're not discussing some mechanism of either quantity or some other measurements, I don't see why we would make any changes to the bylaw. We, in theory, have quite a few rules that aren't being followed anyway. So why make more just to have those not be followed? Or again, only followed by some campaigns and not others. So the other thing I also think we wanted to raise here, so that's enforcement, big issue. The other issue we had is people just remove signs. They just steal them. And so, we see a lot of this in the last week of the campaign. Some campaigns are getting very good at that, just disappearing other people's signs. That's pretty common. I made a joke at the last election that I didn't have to go collect very many because they were all stolen. So again, it was made my life easier. I might have lost to Councillor Davis because a bunch of signs went missing. So, for example, I think we've got to try to do something about that because I don't think that's acceptable. But again, I don't think there'll be much enforcement on that. And the other problem that we saw here, even in the most recent school board by-election, was people are moving candidates' signs and then claiming the candidates violating the rules, putting it on social media. So again, I don't like that very much. That happened to multiple campaigns in the last election. It's done deliberately. And so I think that again, do we create a bunch of rules that then create opportunities for those that aren't as scrupulous to cast aspersions on other people's campaigns? So I think signs do have a number of complicated elements to them, and hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss those a bit more before we start trying to make recommendations to amend. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Mayor? No, Councilor Davis is first, I think, yeah, and then Mayor Froze, and then Councilor Richter. That's okay. Just have to keep track.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, geez, I get to trump the mayor. Okay, anyhow, you know, there's one thing that I'm probably maybe too old-fashioned this way, but one thing that does stem an election is all of a sudden you start seeing campaign signs. The first thing I think about is, well, the first thing I think about is it's a big job to put up your own signs. I put up all my own signs, well, with the help of a couple people. Earl Mufford helps. But it also generates people driving around the township and they say, oh yeah, the election, we better get out. We better pay attention. Now's the time. So, because not everybody, and I know, Councilor Richter, maybe I'm a little bit, like I say, old-fashioned, but there's lots of people in rural Langley that maybe are not big on social media. I hate social media. I don't get on it. My wife does. I get on it, but I mean, it's so just remember, if nothing else, when you put up a bunch of signs, people hate them, but it also, we sometimes have such a low turnout that if it can stimulate more people and say, oh yeah, I better get out and vote. And it seems like a bad way to vote because you're maybe an uninformed voter and, well, I like that sign and I like this sign and, you know, that sort of thing. The other thing is, there's been a lot of really good things said. I can't stand, and Councilor Whitmore talked about Langley where they had certain areas and they just put up a bunch of signs. And I'm concerned about, I don't like to put my signs where anybody else is. I try to put my signs in between the clumps, because what happens is the clump becomes just a bunch of stupid signs. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that in that way, but all of a sudden there's just a whole bunch of signs there. Nobody's paying attention. You know, next you'll need a sign that's taller than anybody else's. So there's that. I do think that I had thought of the lines of Councillor Arneson. We are in a bit of a conflict of interest. However, when does it start? Councillor Richter says, well, let's do it right now. Well, actually, no, I'm putting words in her mouth. I didn't mean to, but her thing is, let's do away with science. We do have an advantage as incumbents. We do, and now we're making a rule for the next, but that would, in one or two more elections, that would breed itself out. So that, well, maybe all the incumbents won't be there anymore and the new ones, and so that it's very, you know, we can sharpen our knives here and there. One thing that I do not want to see, Councillor Chair, is a long period of time like we had in 2018. That is too long, and I actually got comments from a couple councillors saying, Davis, your signs aren't up, get them up. And so here we're you know, so absolutely keep this the 21 days or something. Then it's palatable for the public. It lets them know we're there. It lets them know there's an election. Get involved. I'm sounding like a politician myself, but you know, if we had a committee, and we had a committee in 2011, we had a committee to look at the numeration, and the committee was not Eric Woodward, Councillor Woodward's. What they did is they had a preset, like I think there was a doctor, and there was somebody from public. They had like we didn't pick who the committee was. You can't, if you're going to have a committee on something like this, you can't pick the council can't go near it with a 10-foot pole. They just have to say, make a committee and follow some sort of rule. And I know that the numeration thing, they just had individual people, and the individual people, like, I know one was a school teacher, one was, it was a pre-prescribed committee, and that way we didn't have anything to do with, well, I want my friend in there, I want my friend in there, that sort of crap. So anyhow, just my comments for now. Thank you. Over.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Mayor Froese, you're up.
Well, thank you. Good discussion. I know I've gone through 4 elections. I run in 3 of them, and I was the sign guy for Councillor Dornan on her committee. And that was kind of the Wild West back then. We were putting signs up on boulevards and everywhere. And over time, I think council has come up with some really good changes in the bylaw without going to committee, because we all know, and I think if we still always keep in mind that we want to maintain as much democracy as possible, but still ensure certain things. And that's we didn't like the cluttering at the intersections, and that got changed. We didn't like the boulevards, the center medians being full of signs, and that got changed. And a few things. Safety is important, making sure that vehicles can, drivers and vehicles have clear sight lines. Some have been concerned about the reflective tape, and so that's something, and having no flashing signs to distract. A lot of good things have come, in the time that I've seen campaigns go through, and I'm sure it evolved even more before that. Councillor Long and Councillor Richter would probably have other information on how it was before that. That's my memories. Some really good comments. I did think of that committee idea. I mean, it's certainly possible. We did it, as Councillor Davis mentioned. The remuneration committee was selected by staff, and it was no members of council on that. And they came back with a recommendation that council endorsed, and it was well done. I did think of this having a committee of people who've run before that are not on council, so they would have a viewpoint of, hey, they maybe want to run again and come up with some ideas. But I also think that we have a committee right here that has some experience, and as long as we keep those basic things. The cost to enforce, again, it's been talked about how vandals or others or whoever, I mean, we've all put up signs, I think, and we've all had signs moved, destroyed, blown away by the wind. When it used to be Halloween was the big event, we had to make sure we kept signs for November 1st because Halloween came through, and sometimes I'm sure it's a variety, but I think a lot of it is kids, being kids, being young people driving around and kicking down signs and doing stuff that Councillor Davis and I probably did when we were kids. And but yet that's a problem. So having a cost for signs that are improperly placed, or a fee for candidates may be unfair when it's be so easy to move their sign around to the place that's illegal and then or not allowed for in this bylaw. So I'm concerned about that. It's just it opens up another window of messing up somebody else's campaign or their funding. Then the other thing is how do we collect? So my experience, 25 to 30 people run for council. I think I've always had 3 run for mayor, and some people are running on a shoestring. They don't spend hardly any money. They don't have a big fundraising campaign. Some do, and that's been pointed out today. But now that those that are running, on a shoestring, are now faced with several $100s in fees, which wouldn't take long. 8 signs and you've got $200, and they can't afford it, don't pay, and now we're starting to go into collections and enforcing it. So there may be a thought, and this is up to council, that there is a cost of running an election, and that cost includes running around our bylaws, running around enforcing it, following up on complaints, which I think they do a good job, but there certainly is a cost, and a lot of signs end up piled up at their works yard. And so we can consider that as the cost of running an election, or we can find a way to recapture. But I'm concerned that there are those who run that just don't have the money and don't put up a lot of signs, and they could be trapped by in this vandalism that goes through, and we've all seen it. And I like the idea. It's a reminder for elections. I certainly think there may be an opportunity for somehow restricting signs on public property, but we can always put them on private property. I believe that's what Councillor Richter meant. It was allowed on private property in Surrey, but not on public property. Certainly, we've done parts of that. We don't put it in front of schools or parks, township parks, and it's restricted by intersections for the safety. And so, certainly there's some merit to that. And then the time for signs up, I agree. I think last time, I think it was a bit of we tried something different and it didn't work. And that's okay to dial it back and go to 20 or 21 days prior to the election. I think that's very appropriate. It's less sign pollution for our residents and ourselves to have to go through. So, the way the sign bylaw came back to us, I'm quite happy with. But certainly, if council wishes to make some changes, that assist in running a good campaign. But I'm concerned about the cost of it, and maybe we have to have just it's cost the municipality every time, but it costs the municipality every time to run an election. I think last election that was run in the municipality was mail-in ballots, and the cost per voter was extremely high. But my Alexa's talking to me. But the cost for that was extremely high, but it's democratic, and we bore that cost, or the school board bore that cost, or whoever did. So sometimes there's just a cost of running an election that we can't avoid. So my comments, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Richter, up again. And then I'd like to speak.
Well, don't you get to go before me because you haven't spoken yet?
If you like.
Yeah.
That would be great. Okay, well, I've written down a lot of what the council have been saying. As I mentioned, we are 201 square kilometers, so we are geographically different than many places. I think Maple Ridge is it's much smaller, but it has a bit of a spread out rural area too. But, Langley City is certainly only 4 square miles. The city of Surrey, I think, is a little bit, more contained in terms of its rural and urban mix. So I don't know as we can apply the same rules as many of those. I've been through a few elections, so I think I got some experience here. I was able to sell my signs. No, I didn't, but the kids liked them. But I think education's a big key. I don't know as I can recall getting a leaflet or having a leaflet that I gave to my volunteers. So a lot of the errors that were made on my campaign were from eager volunteers that thought they were doing the right thing. Kind of like Mayor Froh said, the wild, wild west, just go for it. And they often look at other signs and say, well, that was there, so I should put mine there. So education, no matter what we decide today, I really think that number one, we need to have a really good education system or something for when a candidate signs up. Maybe they sign an affidavit or they sign something that says that they received brochures. Maybe we could give them a dozen brochures on cardboard or something that they can hand to their sign crews. So whatever we decide today can be clearly articulated, because I think there has been some confusion. I certainly agree with almost everybody, in fact, on the different challenges, including people stealing, people moving signs. But I do like the limit one, because perhaps that addresses some of the concerns as a starting point. If there was a limit of 300 signs, which is similar to another community, that might be a start, because I don't know how many I had, but I sometimes you'll see a street with 50 signs on that one street, right? The little signs. That became quite a trend in the last couple of elections, where you put these small ones, one after another, after another, after another. So I really do favor looking at that if we decide to keep the signs, and the limit would be a good way to go. The other part to the limit that would be of benefit in enforcement is if your sign is picked up. Now, I agree with Councillor Woodward. There's going to be an argument as to how that sign got there. I don't know how you would adjudicate that, but right now, nobody goes and picks up their signs that have been picked up because they just put out more. And who wants to pay $25 to get your sign back? But if you had a 300 sign limit and you lost 10 signs, you might be more inclined to go and get those from the works yard, because, I suppose you could cheat, but theoretically, you'd be down 10 signs or 20 signs, or however many signs got picked up. So that might give you, an opportunity to keep them picked up from the works yard and perhaps provide some offset. But I also agree wholeheartedly with Mayor Froh that there is a cost to running elections, and we shouldn't necessarily be transferring that burden to some of the candidates that maybe can't afford it. Education, enforcement, we're quite large. I like the idea of a limit. The third party, I can't see how that would work, even though it's a good idea, because it takes it out of our hands. But that might preclude any of those members of that committee to ever run in a future election, because they somehow were involved in decision making. If we want to get this process completed by the end of this term, sending it to committee is one way not to do it. So I have some issues with that, even though we possibly could have done that right away in November 2018, but we didn't. Um, Limiting locations, there was discussion about that. I have an issue with that too, because of that would be very difficult to enforce, and which streets would be on, which streets wouldn't be on. Actually, I think, as Councillor Davis said, the rural areas are probably the most important for signage, just to get education out there. And passing it on to the next council, well, that one never works. If we can't deal with it, how can the next one deal with it? And if they, they're going to do the same thing. So I do think that a decision of some kind has to be made, hopefully at this meeting for this council. And maybe we could look at what we agree with first, pick off the things that we really want to keep, i.e. the 21 days. I don't know if anybody on this council would be opposed to that, because we had the one year, was it the year before last, I guess, where it was 6 weeks. It was just bizarre. So 21 days seems to be quite average. I checked all over the country, and many of them the same, 24 weeks, 20 weeks. It seems to be quite common. I don't know, well, there are some places in Ontario that you can put them up right after the election for the next election. So I guess it does vary across the country. But that's something that we could probably agree on. And maybe that's one way to eat this, like eating an elephant here. We can take up little bits at a time of things that we agree on, then we'll be left with the more contentious issue. So, Council thinks about that, but Councillor Richter, you are now up.
Thank you. There's been a lot of ideas thrown out, and just want to comment on some of them. First of all, any council can change the rules. So, and the next council that comes in might not like the sign rules that we have in place, and they can change it. I'm saying for our council, I think we have to look at all the complaints that are coming in from the public relative to the signage in elections. And this sign wars thing that goes on, the public doesn't like. The only people who like it are the campaigns. So, relative to Surrey, because I had mentioned Surrey, I still think Surrey's model is the way to go. You can have as many signs as you want out there, just make sure they're on private property. So you want to get elected, you get in touch with all your friends, you ask them to put a sign up, there's still going to be signs out there. But not having them on the boulevards is what is, I think, what the public wants. They don't want to see this blanket of signs. And like I say, Surrey is the same size as Langley for all intents and purposes. It's not smaller than Langley. Geographically, maybe a tad, but basically it's got a bigger population even than Langley does. I think there are other options that campaigns can use. They can, like this sign thing is an old-timey approach to elections that I believe has reached the point where it's being abused. And when we think about it, if there are like over 30 candidates running in one election, and that's just for the municipality. That doesn't include the dozen or more that are running for school board. Multiply that by the number of signs that are out there, and this is where the sign pollution is coming from. We have to, and putting numbers on, I'm of mixed take on that, because I really think that if you limit the numbers, then you're going to have our staff out counting signs. It's the cost of our staff time picking up, storing, contacting people, and now they're going to have to count signs. Like, that's ridiculous. It's just a very poor use of our very expensive staff time. And candidates have other options. Phone people, put ads in the newspaper, do door knocking. There's all kinds of ways to get the message out there that you're looking to run in an election. You don't need to litter all of our streets with signs in order to get that message out. And I think while the committee idea is a good one, it's too late now. We should have done that right after the last election. So perhaps the next council that comes in will take that to heart and set up a committee to review it after the next election and find out what they want. But this this free-for-all sign wars that we've got happening now, it's not working for our community. There's so many complaints that come in. And I agree with some of the comments that were made earlier with regards to signs being sabotaged, spray painted or removed or relocated. And it's not the kids that are doing this, it's the campaign workers that are doing this. Because the campaign workers, the sign crews tend to be very tightly associated with the campaign that they're working on. So I don't for 1 minute buy that it's the kids' problem. It's not the kids' problem. They maybe contribute 1%, if that. So I still think that what we ought to do is follow the Surrey model and for this election and just see if it works. And we've got another election coming up. We've got an election, a federal election coming up. So if we just went to the Surrey model and said, you can put as many signs up as you want as long as they're on private property. They're not allowed on public streets where our staff has to incur the cost of maintaining them. So I think that's a fair thing. I think it's something we should try. I haven't talked to anybody on the Surrey Council, but maybe it's worth talking to them and see how they feel that the sign worked or didn't work last time around. But certainly it was very pleasant driving through Surrey with the lack of signs. And that's what I think upsets our Langley residents. There's just too many signs. And unfortunately, there are campaigns that take it to a far extreme. And I'm thinking of bird signs and fox signs as an example. So the idea of putting past councillors on a committee to decide on signs, I don't buy into. I don't think that's a very good idea. Nice suggestion, though. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyway, I would like to put forward a motion that we ask staff to change our bylaw to reflect the Surrey bylaw and to bring that forward for council's approval. And when you're ready to entertain a motion, that's the motion I'd like to put on.
How about we hold that for a little more discussion, but we've got a firm direction being sought out. I had a question. If whatever changes we came up with today, I guess they'd have to come back to the council, be a couple of weeks or a couple of months, perhaps. But if there were a fall election with the federal government, I know Ms. Bauer and Mr. Back, you said that aside from this paramount CY or whatever, it would be in time though potentially for the federal election in the fall, if there were one in the fall. That's a question to staff. Would it be? And of course,
I believe it would be. We could definitely process that before the fall. We would have it done probably before the summer break for council.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Thanks, Councillor Richter. But I was wondering, do you think we could think about this 21-day thing? Because regardless whether they're on public property or on private property, whether they're big, small, whether you're allowed more or less, maybe we could put that one to bed.
Yeah, I think the amount of time that signs are up should be reduced. I agree with you on that point, but I think we should just take a whole dramatic stand on this next election. And if it doesn't work, then let the next council change it to what they want.
So Councillor Ferguson, you're up next, but I'm wondering if I could put a question to the committee then, that we ratify the 21 days now and get that out of the way. And I'm wondering if there's an appetite for that.
I'll move it.
We say the 21 days is going to be
I'll second that.
Okay, so it's moved by by Mayor Froese and Councillor Ferguson on the time period, not how many signs or the locations of signs or any of the other bylaws regarding signs, but in the period of time. So it doesn't matter when the nomination day is, it's 21 days prior to election. And it used to be 20. Maybe Ms. Bauer could explain, before I allow Councillor Woodward to speak, why it was changed 20 to 21. Because it was, right? It was 20 days at one time, then we amended it to 21 for some reason.
I believe that came out of the special council meeting. Council put a motion forward to change it to 21.
Okay, so let's look at the calendar. Is it because election day is always a Saturday?
Yeah.
So then
it is easier for everyone to figure out 21 days is exactly 3 weeks before the election.
Right, so that means you're not going out on a Sunday, you're going out on a Saturday as your first day. Okay, so now we're discussing the 21 days, and Councillor Ferguson, you up first, but do you want to speak first, or Councillor Wood would put his hand up right after we mentioned the 21 days, but one of you can go ahead.
Oh, well, I'll go, but I want to speak after, the next thing. Yeah, I think 21 days is good. I think the last time, it was the last election, 2018, where it was, we were putting the signs up, was it 6 weeks or it was 5? It was, but I made sure I had at least a couple up. I know that, that I didn't have that many signs, but I think the people had I think Councillor Woodward had the least signs, but I could be wrong. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Woodward on the 21 days.
So kind of get the idea, what's the rationale for this? Because the current bylaw says exactly what you're moving. So all we have to do is make it clear that any revisions we want. Is that what you're trying to achieve here? So if we go with some larger sweeping reform, you want to maintain 21 days? Because it's already in the bylaw, so I'm confused why this is necessary.
Oh, okay, well then maybe I'm confusing you inadvertently. I thought that it wasn't that way last year. This report that we're considering today that was referred to this committee included the 21 days, but it hasn't been passed. Ms. Bauer, could you clarify? At this moment, we don't have a regulation, or do we?
At this moment, we actually do. Council had a special meeting at the end of November of last year in order to amend the bylaw prior to the school district by-election. And at that time, it was amended from the previous date, which was once the nomination period begins. It was amended to the 21 days before the election.
Okay, so thank you for that. So really, yeah, we're being slightly redundant, but I think we're trying to put this thing to bed in some respects. So we're not changing the 21 days is what we're saying here. So I don't even...
Point of order.
So I'm voting to affirm that the bylaw, just to confirm what the bylaw already says. Like,
well, let's see. I'm going by the report that's...
why don't we just withdraw this? Because obviously the mover, it's fine. I mean, but why are we voting on something that already exists?
I'm going by the memorandum that's in front of us of the referral, and the referral mentioned the 21 days. So
well, maybe you should have read the bylaw, Councillor.
Apologies. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think there's a point of order here that we need to get straightened out. And if it's already in the bylaw, why it's redundant for us to be voting on this? Maybe the clerk, who's also our parliamentarian, can comment on that. Like, if it's there, we don't need this 21 days.
Well, I do agree that it's been clarified now that it is in the bylaw. So perhaps I was wrong by saying, I just wanted to make sure that we were all going to ratify that, and we were comfortable with that we weren't going to make a change to that. Because at this meeting, remember in the very beginning, it's wide open. We can do anything. So I think what I'm trying to get consensus from the committee is that's one thing that we're not going to touch, and we can move on to other challenges. So I apologize if I did that in form of a motion or in form of rewriting a bylaw or not being up to date on the bylaw as much as I could have been. But either way, if we're all in agreement with the 21 days, we don't even have to have a vote. We can just move on to the next challenge. Mayor Froese, can you help me out?
I think Ms. Bauer would have more advice on parliamentary procedures. As motions movement, and it is, you can just rule it out of order because it's already there. It's redundant. So if you want to just do that, then we can move on.
Okay, with no objection, we'll just withdraw the motion then.
Sure, just rule it out of order.
It's the same thing. We're all in agreement with the 21 days. Thanks for pointing.
And it's, you know, there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's nobody's fault for missing something or not missing something. We should have read the bylaw. We've read it through, but it's been a good discussion. So I think those comments should be
Okay,
maintained a bit.
Mayor Froese, want to add some more? Councillor Ferguson, you're back up because you wanted to talk about something else.
No. Hey, Bob, I'm sorry. I think you asked me to talk, so I took my thing off mute. Now everyone's talked. Am I allowed my 2 bits? Okay. So actually, I think I know what you were trying to do. You're just trying to get something achieved. And so that was, I think the main thing was we all kind of agreed 21 days, but then it got a little complicated. So I'm just concerned, maybe Mr. Backham, it strikes me we changed something, and there was, I think it was 218. Is there anything that can come up that can prevent it from being 21 days? Like, it's easy to say 21 days, but it has to be, all of a sudden, is it the Queen's birthday okay, forget it. I didn't mean to say that, but all this, that's because that's important. Is there something that can say, oh, it can't be 21 days? So we have to be, generally it should be 21 days or less. I agree with that. But is there something that we're overlooking, like Bob, the guy that does the elections. He might Wilson. Wilson might
Bob
know.
Wilson. Bob Wilson.
Bob Wilson might know something that says, "Oh, that's fine. It'll work 9 out of 10 elections." So we gotta maybe ask him. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a reply. Is there anything that staff can think of that would preclude the 21 days?
Ms. Bauer, I think last time it was based on simply the timing of when we started to count. Can you recall in terms of where we were at in the last election and then how we modified that?
The last election, we did have a special meeting in order to ensure we were in enough days ahead of the nomination period, which is the one restriction that does exist in the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, that changes to an election bylaw or sign bylaw need to be made in enough days ahead of the nomination period. As far as how many days the signs can be placed, that is totally the purview of council. So if we say 21 days, then it is 21 days. I don't know of any changes that would necessitate moving that day unless given direction by council or amending a bylaw.
Okay. And so we're going to put to bed the 21 days. We've ratified it without even a vote, but we're all agreeing. And I might mention that my recollection of 2 elections ago was that we all of a sudden realized that there was this concept of having signs up on nomination day, which was 6 weeks, and we wanted to change it, but there was a period of time where you had to put in changes and we missed it by a couple of days. So, all right, we're moving on from the 21 days, and Councillor Ferguson, you are up.
Okay, I guess I'm up. Okay, thank you very much. It's I know that it's been mentioned, the veterans now, Councillor Davis being a veteran, and the mayor, and yourself, and Councillor Richter. I know I wasn't mentioned as I'm a newcomer, but the thing is, all the things mentioned that are objections, people not picking up their signs or people moving, all of those things, Mr. Wilson, Bob Wilson knows that. He sends out emails, he sends out information, whenever, and complaints come in by phone, by email, it's all dealt with it. Our staff do a phenomenal job. The trouble is when you see a sign go up and come down, staff aren't necessarily always chasing it down, but the candidate is notified immediately. Now, whether that candidate responds accordingly, I don't know. I can't respond. Mr. Wilson would certainly know that. Well, maybe he should have been here today. I don't know. Because he's a good resource, because he's one of the guys, like, I guess a bit like me, that's been around a while. And everything that's been said about the fact that, other than that wasn't mentioned, signs were burned. I've had a few of those. I mean, all those things, they happen everywhere, not just Langley. And people do all sorts of things, steal and sign, moving. That's all old news. The thing is, moving into the future, and by the way, I used to put my signs up at Halloween just to see what would happen. But I mean, and it usually never much happened. Phoning is getting more difficult. People don't like to be bothered. There's all sorts of phony phone calls out there on a regular basis. They don't like to be bothered. It's still a use. Door knocking, yeah, that's great. But the trouble is people don't like to be not bothered at home either. And also, I want to mention the word safety, because safety is a lot different than it was, I hate to say it, 30 years ago. But there's a lot more gated communities. There's a lot more apartments that you're not allowed in. There's a lot more and more of our new population are not as accessible. Oh, by the way, probably not in your world or perhaps some of mine, is social media can get very nasty. So as much as people do the best they possibly can, it's not going to change. But the fact that I still believe that there's a need for signs out there. I think the reason why our friends in Surrey had to make drastic measures, because they were putting their signs, they were what they call screwing them to stop signs. And they were everywhere. They're blocking traffic. You couldn't see. It was the worst possible thing possible. They had to do something. I don't think we're there yet. I think our bylaw is good. I think we've done all the right things. And regardless of all the challenges we have, I think we run a pretty good community. I'm not really one that wants to make major changes to our sign bylaw. I just think it's an opportunity to put a few signs. Now, I did hear the fact that Les put a number on whatever 300 or whatever. I think that's a good idea. And also, I don't like the 4x8 signs. I'm not sure, Ms. Bauer, if 4x8s are allowed in our bylaw or not. If I may, through the chair, just one quick question. That's 32 square feet.
I just have to quickly look that up. We do have a limit on the signs, and I'm not too sure if it was 4x8 that was allowed or if it was another limit.
32.3, that's almost square feet. That's almost, it's just short. I'm not sure how you do that. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, those are my last point. I'm not really big on change to the bylaw. Thank you.
32.3 is about 4x8. Okay, so we're an hour in. Maybe we should, Councilor Richter, are you going to try and make your motion?
Yeah, I'm going to put forward the motion that we ask staff to revise the bylaw to include the 21 days and to follow the Surrey model of permitting signs only on private property.
Okay, so if we look at the attachment A, on the first page of it, B1.
Don't you need to call for a seconder on that?
No, I'm just clarifying what you're moving. And that is basically what it says in that box. No city right-of-way, sidewalks, boulevards, medians, not on any public property, no highways.
Exactly. That's what I'm moving.
Because the other things in those boxes we may not agree with. It says that you get 14 days to remove them afterwards and all those kind of things. So you're just talking about that one box about its location.
About the location, yes.
Yeah, do we have a seconder for that? Councilor Woodward. All right, so we've got a motion on the floor. And let's have discussion on the motion.
Okay, I'd like to start by saying that the motion does not ban signs. It just bans signs on public property. You can still have signs, just put them on private property. And if the signs are on private property, then they're going to be watched by the owners of those property and I guess policed, if you would, or enforced, if you would, by the owners of the property, which takes the load off our bylaws department. That makes a whole bunch of more sense to me than trying to say that 40 plus candidates in an election can have an unlimited number of signs up on an unlimited number of public streets. I mean, that is what's out of control here, and that is what has to be reined in. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Councilor Woodward was next, I think. Better keep my list going. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councilor Long. I just want to make it clear that seconded that for discussion. I think it's important for us to debate this item because it keeps coming up, you know, a total ban, which I think has some merit, but I think, again, when I preface my initial comments, I think it will advantage some over disadvantaging many, many others. So I think this is important to debate it, but I definitely have grave concerns about that significant event. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councilor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to support this at this time. I think that we already have quite a few restrictions in the township bylaw on where we can put them, on you know, whether it's a median or whether it's a roundabout. It has to be 20 meters away from an intersection. So we do have a number of restrictions already. And I do think that there will be a number of candidates and that, you know, are less known in the community, don't have as many connections in the community. And so for them to find as many private people who will put their sign on is difficult. So I think in order to create it the most fair we can, and I appreciate the words that Councilor Woodward has suggested, that no matter what the rules are, some will advantage and some will be disadvantaged. I appreciate that. But I think that having the ability to put them on some public property allows people that are less known in the community a better opportunity to get known and to be elected. And so I think our restrictions are fairly good along this line. We also can't put them in township parks or in front of election voting areas. So we have a lot of restrictions already. I don't think we need to limit it more. And so for that point, I'm not going to support this motion.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I don't think it upsets the discussion, but Ms. Bauer, can you clarify? It's not just is it parks and schools or properties owned by the township? Perhaps if you wouldn't mind helping us with the clarification on what is currently not allowed in terms of public property for signs.
The current bylaw does prohibit placement of signs in front of schools, parks, and township properties.
Right. So in other words, in front of the event center, for example.
That's right.
So it doesn't have to be a voting place, but any township owned properties, I guess. Okay.
Yes.
Councilor Arneson, you are up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I take all of these things and try and measure the compromise I think that we need to consider in light of the fact is I think we'd all be agreeable to the notion that nothing that we do is going to be without any consequence in terms of favoring or making more difficult some people's options. I can't really support at this time the Surrey bylaw. I think that despite the geographic situation that they have there, I think there's a number of differences, including the fact it occurs to me that they do have slates running there. And I think that would make quite a difference in terms of the type of signage that they have. And also this notion somehow, it seems even though there might be way too many signs that are put out, I would prefer to try and limit the overall number of signs, but I'd like to universalize the idea that there could be valuable information that's being put forward in a way that's very open and accessible to people. You know, for example, what if I only knew people or my closest friends lived in one neighborhood? How helpful is that to me? Does that mean as a candidate, I'm now supposed to be canvassing all my friends and others in order to, in addition to contribute to my campaign, should I need that? And also then to say, oh, by the way, can I put a sign out there? I just think it's a bit onerous if you completely exclude the opportunity to have it on any public lands. And so I think what would be fairer is to have a multi-pronged approach where we're limiting certain aspects. Currently, I think that's the evolution of our plan, as I understand it so far, our bylaw. We are incrementally changing it. I think that this would be a change too far, and I don't know that we should be the group that's experimenting with what that would look like for the upcoming election. And it may be true that the federal campaign, we'd get the value of them being the guinea pigs, but I also don't think that that would be reasonable and not necessarily transferable information, because I think there are a lot of differences between a local government election, including the fact that we generally have, 27 to 30 people that are running just for elected office for local government, let alone the school board. So at this time, I'm not prepared to support this, but I do appreciate the mover trying to get this move forward so that we would have something comprehensive. This has been discussed a long time, and obviously I would have preferred that we had done something about it sooner, because now we're just saying, well, it's too late, let's just do it now. So yeah, I can't support this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arneson. Councilor Davis, you're next, then Councilor Quinn speak because Councilor Rick already spoke.
Okay, thank you. Actually, one thing about this Surrey model is, well, before I go there, Saturday I had to go to Coquitlam or Haney, and I turned wrong section, so I had to turn around. Anyhow, I got lost, and I noticed a whole bunch of signs on front lawns, and it was the subject matter doesn't matter. Well, it was the stop CP rail yard expansion, and whether you agree with that or not. That the fact was, I saw a bunch of signs. I said to Nicole, that person in that yard doesn't want the train. That person in that yard doesn't want, and that's what it would look like, private property, and. To be honest with you, that can be a real disadvantage because, certain members of council or certain people running an election could, oh yeah, I'd like a sign, or oh yeah, some people can talk their way into, but it does show it's a lot harder to phone somebody and say, can I put a sign up? Can I put a sign up? you know, that gets really difficult because some people don't want signs. They don't want the neighbors to know, you know, it's politics. But that, I just wonder, and we have a few restrictions with this new bylaw that, you know, keeps it off public property, township owned property. I think that there is some merit to this, but, you know, at this point, I would wonder if maybe I might not support it simply because it could be a lot harder. When I was putting signs up, I have a list and a map and all that sort of stuff. And boy, you got to go all over to put, you know, and when somebody asks for a sign, you have to put it up. Oh, yes, you know, you're a constituent, you want my, you know, like the election. Yes, I'll be right there. I'll put one up. It's a lot more work putting up private, but that doesn't matter because this is an election. And but I think I'm going to leave it for now. I think I will support the restrictions that we have. Thank you.
And thank you. Councillor Ferguson, you're next.
Yeah, Councillor Davis is bang on. I liked his comments, and I'm going to have difficulty supporting this as much as I think that the merits that has been mentioned in this motion are excellent. In the fact that I think all of us be a better world if we didn't have all these all sorts of signs everywhere, and everywhere you go, if people are putting signs up to support their cause, but the opportunity for people to get their name out. I also I want to emphasize the 300 signs starting to sound better and better and better. And yes, people running for council are generally good people, and they will certainly, I would believe, adhere to that. We'd have to ask Maple Ridge, see how well that goes. You know, we want to just respect people or through decorum or good people. And, you know, anyway, it also cuts the cost down for people running. Anyway, you may see less. And I actually didn't think last campaign was that bad, other than there was just an awful lot of time. It was just too long. So I think I can't really support this bylaw, but I think you're right. And I think that Councillor Davis had the best sign because he had a cow in his sign. And if I run again, I'm going to think I can put an elephant or something in my sign. Or just get something different. Thank you.
Don't give away your campaign secrets yet. Okay, Councillor Kunst, you're up.
Yeah, I'm of the same. I appreciate, you know, the movers' intent here, and I think, you know, the public is obviously they're sick of signs, but I still feel that in order to have a fair election for the people coming, you know, it wouldn't feel right to limit them to people that they know. Maybe a lot of people who are, you know, haven't lived here for a long time, wouldn't have I mean, I've lived here my whole life, so I know people all over the township. And for someone just, you know, new to the community that feels like they have something to offer, that would be a, you know, bit of a challenge for them. And I would feel really bad for our farmer counselor, because everybody would want to put a sign on his property, and he'd have a hard time saying no to everybody. So anyway, those are just my comments. So I will not be supporting this at this time.
I had a sign years and years ago from Hugh Davis.
How do I mute him? Oh, gee. Okay, I'll just say a few words before Councillor Richter, because I haven't spoken the first time. My concern is, as I mentioned earlier, about the size of the township and the rural-urban split. I know that Surrey is almost the same size geographically, perhaps. They have much larger population. But I think in the township we have a lot more people living in rural areas. And we have, you know, we still have so much of it is rural that it's a challenge to get the word out all around the municipality. So that's why I think restricting, and I think the motion is leaning towards restricting the signs in some respects. So this is the first step to say, well, we're not going to have them here, we're not going to have them there. Maybe there are other ways that have been alluded to that we can restrict the number of signs or something. So that's my comments. Councillor Richter, you're up for the second time, and then we'll vote. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you. You know, I'm sorry, I'm finding a bit of this ironic. This is the council that passed the fact that we're in a climate emergency and has adopted a greenhouse gas and climate action plan. And yet we're saying it's okay for at least 40 plus vehicles, 10 for each council candidate, one for each council candidate, one for each school board candidate, to spend 21 days driving around, putting signs up, fixing signs, moving them, whatever they do. Like, I'm missing the connection here. I'm sorry. To me, this is a little bit hypocritical. So it's clear it's not going to pass. I think that's unfortunate. I think it flies in the face of all the other good things that we've done this council, but it is what it is. And I just want to say that I'm going to propose an alternate amendment if this one dies. Thank you.
Did you want to add to that, Councillor Arneson, or we can take the vote? Councillor Arneson?
Yeah, you might as well just take the vote. Thanks.
Let's do that. Okay, so on the motion before us, all in favor?
I am in favor. I think Surrey's doing the right thing here.
Okay, and all opposed? Surrey's doing wonderful things too, but not necessarily in this regard. Okay, so that's the end of that. So now we have 45 minutes left. So let's have another motion. What do you think?
Okay, well, I'd like to...
Somebody else wants to jump ahead, but Councillor Richter, you have your hand up, so go for it.
Yeah, I had my hand up. I'd like to propose then that we restrict the locations to one public street in each of the 8 or 6 or however many communities we have. So one in Fort Langley, one in Murrayville, one in Aldergrove, one in Willoughby, one in Brookswood, for signage. And that means that each candidate could have 8 signs.
Oh, eight for one sign. They're allowed one sign in each jurisdiction.
Yeah, one sign on it, like to set a stretch of road in each of the communities that candidates can put a sign up if they want to put a sign up, just like in Langley City, so that we are reducing the sign pollution and the sign wars effect.
Before I take a seconder, let's be clear, because the properties that you're allowed to put signs on in Langley City are owned by the city, are they not?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. One stretch of city-owned or township-owned public area in each of the 6 communities, so that all the signs will be located in one spot in each of the communities.
I guess let's take a second then, but my question might be, do we actually have a property that would be suitable? So do we have a seconder for that? I see all kinds of hands. Councillor Davis, you're seconding the motion? Do we have a seconder? Because I see hands everywhere, but no seconder. You're seconding, Councillor Kunst? You're waving.
For discussion, yes.
Okay, it's been seconded by Councillor Kunst.
Sorry, I was going to second it too. I did something with the screen. Yeah.
Been thirded by Councillor Davis. And now, who was up first? My gosh, I got hands everywhere.
I think I was.
Huh?
I think I was.
Okay, Councillor.
David, lock the car doors so the kids don't get in it and drive off again.
Zoom can't tell me who put their hand up first. But anyway.
Okay, so I don't mind this, except I would like it not to just be one. I think we could just have a larger area, but I do think that restricting it to certain streets, not, all of the township doesn't need signs on some of these rural roads where they just get blown into the ditch and people don't ever see them again. So if we did, but I think it needs to be a little bit a broader area. But anyway, I don't mind that idea of restricting it to certain streets.
How would you decide which streets? And
that's where we need to discuss that.
Okay. Then we have Councillor Davis, I think.
Yes, thank you. Actually, that maybe not a bad idea, but you know what's going to happen if you restrict it to one street? I think you got to have like maybe the right street. like in Aldergrove, maybe Highway 13 might be a good one because it's a long, and I know what can happen if it's too small of a spot. At 5 after midnight, you'll have people out there trying to get the best real estate on that strip. Not my style, but I've seen that before. And then at least you'd restrict it to this sign wars in one area. Before we did that last motion, I was just thinking about the sign, the song, signs everywhere, sign, blocking up the scenery break in my mind. Do this, don't do that. Okay, sorry, I won't sing again. This might be an idea, but I would ask the mover how much of a road, and I guess we have to discuss that, because if you took one, like another thing is, can I just say that, like, what about doing 96 Glover,
Okay, I'm
Bridger Highway, 16?
Because now we're going to run out of time soon. But I would say if this passes, then we're going to have another report before anything is finalized, because staff are going to have to come back and tell us what roads potentially and so forth. So I wouldn't fret about the details at the moment.
I think that's a fair amendment. I think Councillor Davis could suggest.
Well, then we have 8 streets suggested now. We'll be here forever. We have to get a map out and all that.
Well, is there a reason why the meeting has to end at noon? I mean, isn't the point of council priorities to give staff direction to work with?
I'll make my comments when my hand comes up then. So now it's Councillor Whitmarsh, if you're done, Councillor Davis.
Well, okay, I'm just about done. But I threw out some big streets there, but I just thought that if you did 3 big streets, like I say, I mentioned those streets. But the mover has to say, well, no, I was thinking about 100-foot piece, right? Or right in the downtown core. Oh, sorry, Bob.
The motion is one area in each of 8 communities is what I wrote down. Okay,
so to me, that's one street. Okay. Well, I carry on.
Langley City, which is not streets, it's publicly owned space.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, just a minute. You're interpreting my motion. A street is a publicly owned space. Like, we could take Fraser Highway, for example, or Glover Road, or 264th.
Okay, so then it's not like Langley City. You're talking about something different than Langley City then.
What I'm saying is an opportunity for sign presence in each community and on a street that serves each community, or on an arterial, or on a collector, whatever.
That supports my notion that if this passes, staff are going to have to explain what can and can't be done. Councillor Whitmarsh, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I think many of the reasons that I gave for not supporting the last amendment probably apply to this as well. I think that we already have a lot of restrictions in place on where signs can go, and certainly roads that are off the beaten track aren't getting a lot of signage anyways. Most candidates aren't sticking their signs where a lot of people aren't going, so they're going to be choosing the most traffic-orientated spots anyways. And, what we see in Langley City looks terrible. We end up with 30 signs all crammed together. You can't really see them. One sign's blocking another. We'll end up with all kinds of issues around who gets to put their sign where and how many feet away from another sign you have to be, and all kinds of issues have come up, and it just looks really ugly. And so that's worse, in my opinion. The 21 days takes care of a lot of the issues, and we already have a lot of restrictions on roads, so I'm not supportive of this amendment either.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. And I kind of like the intent of where this is trying to go. I actually view this motion as incompatible with all of us, just except for one, voting against the previous motion. So we're going to restrict signs to select areas on one patch of road in each community. There'll be 8 areas. I can only imagine the frenzy there's going to be 5 seconds before the time to commence to put signs up is going to be. And people will show up a day earlier and put them up. They won't follow the rules. We see this all every other campaign. People just aren't going to follow the rules. So that candidate or that campaign that's not a signage guru from 20 years ago is going to again be disadvantaged by this kind of restriction, then I think it'll set off a frenzy. I mean, I know what immediately occurred to me. Well, I'm going to go to every private property owner I can find and put signs wherever I want. So now you're back to Councillor Kunst's argument, which I think is a good one, that those of us that have connections and are incumbents can only imagine the discussions that are going to be going on for putting signage on a lot of development sites. So I don't like it. I think I'm uncomfortable with it because I think not because it's a bad idea or the intent isn't good, but because again, it'll set off a bunch of other strategies that will then kick in that will again advantage some and disadvantage others. I think, you know, maybe we head down the road of a quantity. I don't know how that, I know I saw that in one of the bylaws. That seemed to make sense. I have no idea how it's enforced. I guess what will happen is campaigns that are well funded or have lots of volunteers will go around and map every other campaign's locations and count their signs and then report that to the township bylaw, which who knows where that will go. They'll just take them down and then they'll be put back up again anyway. So, so I don't think I really support this, but I support what it's trying to do. I just think it sets off a frenzy of private property and the conversations that are going to occur around that. I can't even imagine. I guess we'll see all the developer-friendly members of council, which I think I'm one, not all the time, but most of the time. I guess all of us will get signage on development sites, and those that maybe challenge the status quo won't. And I think that's pretty obvious what will happen. So I don't support it, but again, support the intent.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ferguson on the motion.
Yeah, so as we discuss, it's good discussion. I think it, sorry? Did you say Councillor Kunst?
No, Councillor Ferguson was up because you've already spoke.
Oh, okay. Where is he?
Well, he's there somewhere.
I'm here. I'm here.
Sorry.
I haven't, you don't, okay. So yeah, I can't support this one either. Here's where I'm at. It'll be another motion when the opportunity comes, because I think we have to get in a pecking order whenever that happens from procedurally. Okay, so and so I would think in the future, you know, I think the 300 sign is starting to look better. We can do that, and I also do respect people running for council. I respect that. I think they'll show as much decorum as possible. And also, I don't like the 4x8 sign. So the 32 will be 4x4, which is 16. Okay.
Councillor Arneson hasn't spoken yet from my notes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do look at this as an opportunity to consider where we are trying to go with this. I agree with other councillors and perhaps the mover in general principle that we want to get the volume of signs down. The question is, how do we do it without creating these very negative unintended consequences? And so for me, I think that the first thing that occurred to me is that if you have a limited amount of space where people can put their signs and you're only allowing one, attrition will happen right away. You know, if there's any malfeasance going on, that would be my target, is to go and try and take out anybody's sign. So, you know, the volume of signs in that area, I'd say at the very least, you'd have to consider some other redundancy. And I do take the point of why do we have all these signs in rural areas, but I don't live in a rural area, but I do assume that there are people generally that go on those roadways. To exclude them entirely on those areas, I find to be somewhat problematic. I agree with our current chair, Councillor Long, that I believe we need a staff report to come back with different options. I'm happy to consider some of them today, but I don't think we can make definitive plans about that. And just finalizing what's been said, I think, about the signs on private property, I think Councillor Woodward brings a great point, and others, about the fact that, in a sense, for me, having a sign out in a public area is preferable because it doesn't signify any particular alignment of individuals. Some people don't want to be associated in any way with any candidate for a variety of reasons, including the fact there may be some developers that would like to offer signage on their development sites. However, you know, that could backfire because frankly, there's a lot of people who don't care for excessive development, and they could see that as being a really a negative telegraphing of something that they wouldn't want. So I can't presume to know all the ins and outs. I am in favor of limiting the number because I think from an economic and environmental point of view, it is preferable that we move away from the signs, but to do it in such a way that is really outside of what we've been able to incrementally or evolve to, I think might be problematic at this point. And so, yeah, I wouldn't be able to, unfortunately, support this one either. Thank you.
And I haven't spoken yet, but my comments were that, wow, how would you choose them? I hope they wouldn't be on the street that I live on, would be one chosen. Would you be able to find a location in the village of Fort Langley, for example? I don't know where that would be. So it would open up some more issues, I think, than we're trying to solve. Councilor Cruz, did you want to speak for a second time, or can we call the vote?
Yeah, let's call the vote.
Okay, let's call the vote. All in favor of the 8 areas in each community, 1 in each community, and opposed? Okay, that fails with. I'm sure we. Do I have to mention who it is?
You have to read off who's opposed.
Okay. Councilor Long, Councilor Ferguson, Councilor Whitmarsh, Councilor Woodward, Councilor Mayor Froze, opposed. Councilor Kunst, you're opposed or for? I didn't get Margaret's vote, Councilor Kunst's vote. David, were you opposed?
I'm in favor.
In favor. So Councilor Kunst, where were you at? Opposed? Okay, so everyone opposed except
I was opposed, yeah, sorry.
Okay, let's move on. Now we got half an hour. Let's get one that works. Now it seemed to me that we're moving, all of these suggestions and discussions seem to be moving towards the limit. I don't want to be pushing the limit, but Councilor Ferguson, you got your hand up. Maybe you want to talk about limits. You're on the mute at the moment.
I at least want to get something on the table is that the Township of Lang's existing bylaw, less 4x4, which is 16 feet square sign maximum, and the number would be 300 signs per candidate.
Well, can we do one at a time?
Okay. Okay.
So you want to limit the size and the number?
Size and number only, yeah. And also keep our existing one as attachment A of our report.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's in the report as attachment A, is our sign information. I guess it would be actually, that's just the attachment of the details, but I guess the existing bylaw as well.
Yeah, but we don't have anything. Oh, okay, please clarify then. You want to add the limit of the number of signs, which we do not currently have. Abbotsford, you can have
300 to 300.
Is it true that Abbotsford you can have one sign per candidate? That's what it says here.
On public property, one on public property.
That is bizarre. Okay, so your motion is how many, Councilor Ferguson? 300?
300 per candidate.
Do we have a seconder? I'll second the 300. All right, so we're just discussing the 300 now. Can you put your hands down or up? Who wants to speak to that? Councilor Whitmarsh or Councilor Kunst to the 300?
Yeah. Okay, so who determines if signs get blown down or, taken out by other candidates? Because, like all this discussion that we're having about all these terrible things that happen to people's signs, who's going to now, monitor how many signs a candidate actually has? So that's going to just put a huge burden on our bylaws. So as much as I would like to limit them, I mean, I just see problems with that too. So I'm not sure if I can support that at this time.
Okay, Councilor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I feel probably the same as Councilor Kunst. Intuitively it makes sense, and we limit the signs, but there's no way of being able to count this. How would bylaws possibly be going around the entire 300 square kilometers of the township trying to figure out if you got 300 signs or not? It would be impossible to add up. The things that Councilor Woodward has suggested about people moving signs and taking signs, that would only be exacerbated by this rule. So while it sounds intuitively good, I think the more that you think about it, the more to me it would cause problems. And again, it's 21 days. It's not 60 days or whatever it was last time. It's 21 days, and I think we don't need to worry about sign counting now around the township.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woodward, I think, is next. I hope I've got that right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I again love the intent. I'd be curious to get some information on how the one municipality that was listed in that grid, maybe there are others, actually enforce this, or it's just done on the honor system. I think we've seen how well the honor system has been working so far with a number of campaigns. So, I mean, it just occurred to me too that if a campaign ordered 299 signs, maybe I'll buy them 5 more, put them up, and then declare them in conflict with the bylaw. They don't know how to file the bylaw. I mean, I think we're kind of relying on the honor system here for this. I don't know how many campaigns even got close to 300. That would probably not really apply to a municipal election, maybe just more to the provincial or federal elections. You know, I recall doing something like 100 or something, and include all the little ones and the ones on private property. So again, maybe I would put up 300 and then put up 100 more on private property. Maybe I'm assuming this is limited only to public property, so maybe the mover can clarify that. But I find this to be impractical. I mean, I again like the intent, but if enforcement is challenging for practical reasons to not have a sign at a T intersection, I don't see how we're possibly going to enforce this. And then again, some campaigns will follow the rules and others will not.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. I think. And then Rick.
Yes, thank you. You know, I tend to agree. I'll be really quick. Talk about stealing. My cousins and my friends sold a few signs, and when I put my signs up, I put them up with fence posts. None of them fly down or get knocked over by the wind. So you guys got to put your signs up better. But okay. However,
you have to put a washer on the screw.
Yeah. Okay. Can I say, limiting it to 300? I was like Councillor Woodward's. I don't think I have 300 signs. Like I know I only have like maybe 70 big signs and maybe 200 little ones. And the little ones are always 2 bi-directional, like get them going and coming. So I only have to put them on one side of the road. But I don't know how, I like it. I think it's a good idea. But the enforcement thing, it's like, it's going to be really hard. Considering, are we going to limit it to streets? Like we're, you know what I'm saying? Like if we have a street, like if we can put them all over, I guess the last motion failed anyhow.
Yeah. So I believe this is just public property, which is what Maple Ridge has. I think that's what the mover intended.
Yeah, that's right.
I like it, but I think enforcement, Councillor Ferguson, is going to be really tough. But anyhow, okay, thank you.
Councillor Richter?
Yes. I think I can support limiting signs because anything that moves to reduce the volume of signs is something that I think is good. In my experience in the past elections I've been in, there are a handful, not even a handful of candidates that abuse excessively abuse the number of signs out there. And that creates an unfair advantage as well, because if 1 or 2 candidates can raise the amount of money to finance all these signs and get sign crews out there to put them up, then that gives them an unfair advantage over candidates who can't raise that kind of money. So limiting the number, I think, helps level the playing field and certainly helps on the environmental aspects side of it. But I did have a question, and perhaps the mover and seconder can clarify it. If a slate is running, does that mean each person on the slate gets 300 signs? So a slate of 9 people would get 300 times 9?
I would think now it's my fault. I should have did some more digging with the Maple Ridge Council, because I'm under the impression it worked very well, and I don't have the answers for slate, but I have presumption that the slate would only be allowed 300. So that's that. But I'd have to find out. These are all questions.
So So that should be a clarification into the wording of this motion, including slates, individuals and slates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I say, yeah, that's right.
Now, if that's a friendly amendment, great. If it's not,
Accept
maybe I'll second the motion to amend.
Second.
Just point of order. I think perhaps, I think they're called municipal political parties. There's a term for them, so rather than
municipal political parties. That's right, municipal political parties.
Thank you.
Technically, sorry to interrupt. I think it's electorate associations. Maybe the clerk would clarify.
And
Yeah,
and
I'm
or
not sure.
electors. Put the whole thing down.
Okay, any bunch of people running. So was that your idea, Councillor Ferguson? And if so, is everybody in agreement that we add whatever the proper term is to that? I guess if they register, as a group, then that they would be under that law. Okay, so now we have me and then.
Okay, but just a second. Is that a friendly amendment? Is this going through on a friendly amendment?
If nobody objects, then we've added that. So I'll ask again if there's any objection. Okay, hearing none. Oh, there is an objection.
Yeah, I'm going to object to this. I'm actually not really following how that's going to work even. So if you have 8 people that run separately, they get thousands of signs, but then if people actually formally run as a slate, they now get 300 signs, versus what happens in every election, people pretend they're not a slate, but they're actually a slate. Now they get 900 signs. So maybe the mover can I'm not really clear what the intent is here, what the impacts would be. So let's vote on the amendment. Maybe that can be clarified.
Okay, so we're going to have a motion to amend, I suppose, and then we need to discuss that. Is that right? So, Councillor Victor, you're moving an amendment. Do we have a seconder to the amendment?
Well, I thought Councillor Ferguson was moving it, and I was.
I was moving it.
Okay, so we have a mover and a second on an amendment, which is to include electoral associations or whatever. Can we clear the queue and start again?
Yeah, I'd like to.
The amendment only. Councillor Woodward, it sounds like, yeah.
I just want to clarify what exactly it is and what the amendment actually is.
So the amendment was to add that there would be a limit of 300. Well, I guess we should hear from the clerk, but what I thought I heard was there would be a limit of 300 signs, and now it's being included that if you were in an electoral association, that's what the words were, that rule would apply as well.
I think the simplest way to do it at this point would be that you're allowed 300 signs per individual, and then we just add in an electoral organization.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so I'm not gonna support that. I think it's electorate as well, not electoral. I just want to helpful there. So the idea there then is, I don't want anybody to now freak out that I'm running some sort of slate or something, because the idea here is that we're not putting in a bunch of restrictions yet. We're now going to say that if you run individually and you're just transparent with what you're doing, as opposed to the previous elections, which were people running ads together. I've got one if you want to see it, where they were obviously running together. Some of us weren't invited to their events and so on. So it was clear it was a slate. It just wasn't registered. So now you would create an advantage for people, which they already have in terms of fundraising anyway, that, if you're going to put up 1 million bird signs or 1 million fox signs or Kevin Mitchell's horse signs, you're going to put up horse signs everywhere, that somehow now you're creating an advantage for that. So I again, don't really like this sort of picking and choosing, which rules we're going to do. I don't really know what the intent is here. I also don't know how it's going to be enforced. Because I want to let the chair know I would like to propose an enforcement mechanism when some of these other motions are done. So I have no idea how it's going to be enforced either. So I don't think I support the singling out of one vehicle to run for office versus others. Thanks.
Okay. So with the permission of the group, how about we vote on the amendment and then we go to a vote on the main motion so we can move along. So all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, the amendment fails with Long, Woodward. Please keep your hands up. Whitmarsh, Arneson, Kunst, Froze, and Davis opposed. Okay, back to the main motion. Can we make a vote on that? That was to limit to 300 signs.
No, I want a clarification if I could, please.
Certainly.
Okay, so this means that if we pass this and a group of 9 people decide to run a slate, they're going to have 9 times the amount of signs with the slate's name on it. than the individuals.
Okay, Ms. Bauer, could you perhaps tell us what you think you heard? Because I thought it was going to be per candidate period. So what do you hear?
That it would be 300 signs per candidate. So with the last motion voted, the amendment voted down, it would stay at 300 signs per individual candidate.
So,
Okay, so it would be, if you have a group of 9 people, they're all running together, they're all under one name, that one name gets 300 times 9, so 2,700 signs. I do not support that, sorry.
Councilor Whitmarsh, help us out.
Well, I'm not sure I can help you out, but I agree with Councilor Richter on this. It's just so hard to regulate, and we can't manage figure out who's got 300 signs or not. Never mind having groups working together, maybe even a slate, and now having 2,700 signs for the slate. So this whole idea of controlling signs and limiting the number makes no sense at all in terms of the way to manage it. It only makes sense if you don't care about how it's managed. But if you care about how it's managed and you care about fair rules, then I think you have no choice but to defeat this motion.
Great, thank you. Now, Councilor Ferguson, I think you spoke twice to this. Councilor Woodward, have you spoken a couple of times to this? This is the main motion now.
Councilor Long, I don't know if we're limited in a CPC meeting to speak multiple
Maybe
times.
not, but we are running.
We are. I mean, I'm happy to. I would have governed my comments more if I thought I was.
We have point of order. I didn't think we were limited at a CPC meeting either on the number of times we could speak.
We are unlimited. So who would like to speak again? Councilor Woodward, please, and then Councilor Ferguson, because you made the motion.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I'd be fine with the cap. I think 300 is no cap at all. If there's a slate, a group of candidates, whether they're whatever mechanism they use to run together, if they're going to spend money on 2,700 signs, they're going to lose the election because they're not going to have any money left to do much of anything else. So I fully support them spending all their money on signs if that's what they want to do. I think if we're going to have a limit, it's got to be a meaningful limit that can somehow be enforced. That would be the intent of responding to community complaints, reducing the quantity of signs on the road, assuming 30 candidates putting up 50 signs or 30 signs or 40 signs, some amount that could actually be realistically counted and accounted for. I don't know what a cap of 300 is going to accomplish. So I would support a much lower cap that actually can potentially be enforced, which this one cannot. And I don't know anyone that's going to put up 300 signs other than maybe provincial or federal candidates.
Well, are you going to propose an amendment number?
I mean, I would wait for others to speak if this is just going to fail. If the idea of a cap is going to fail, then there's no point in that process. But I would support a lower cap that's actually enforceable. Thanks.
So I haven't spoken, but I would as well. Now I did second the 300, but I wish I hadn't. I'm thinking like 100 or 150 might be more reasonable. So that is an amendment that we could possibly take and then see how that goes. Does anyone, can I put that amendment out? 100?
I'll second. I don't know if 100's too high too.
But you already said you had 270. So, all right. Okay.
That took 3 elections to get.
Because I think if we're going to pass something and we're not going to pass it because the number's not realistic, we should have this amendment to discuss the number. And if that passes, then we can go the next step. So that we're going to clear the board, and it's been moved by myself. The number.
So has it been seconded? You've reduced it to what?
100 has been moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Davis, to remove the number from 300 to 100.
So every candidate gets 300 or 100 signs, and a slate would get 900 signs.
No, okay, because I'm making the motion. I don't think the slate. I think you're allowed to have your name on 100 signs. So if you want to have your name on 100 slate signs, you don't get any personal signs. So I thought it was 100. The number is per candidate, whether you're on a electorate association or not. You get to use your 100 chances, whichever way you like, on public property. That's the motion. Ms. Bauer, do you get that? 100 signs per candidate.
Yes.
Whether it's on a on there with 9 other names or 5 other names, or whether it's on the fire department or whoever it is. Okay, so we're discussing the amendment. Councillor Arneson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the idea of moving downwards. I don't have a mental map of how many signs I currently have, but I think 100 sounds good. I had another thing. I'm not sure if it needs to be an amendment, but an exploration, and it has to do with streamlining and keeping costs down. And I'm not sure if it's something that could be done or is being done. So my idea is how to rationalize keeping track of how many signs there are. And I'm wondering whether or not, I'm looking at a township envelope and many other situations where they have one of those, I can't remember what they're called, it's not a QWERTY, I know that's the keyboard, but the other thing that you use your cell phone for to take a little picture of it, and it goes back to a source. So if I thought that printed directly on your sign, you could have this locational device. So it's right there, and anybody, including bylaws or anybody else who wanted to put it on there, would go and they could verify that this is one of your signs, etc. So it could help on a number of situations. I just want to put that forward as a little brainstormy idea that I had in terms of keeping track of signs and the numbers issue, because whatever number we come up with, we're going to have the same issue of how do you keep track of them. And it just seemed it might be a more efficient way if that were possible.
Okay. That's the number each sign. That's an interesting idea. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson and then Richter.
Oh, by the way, I never did get a chance to speak, and last time I actually I clarified that point and made a motion. But anyway, this is now speak. I could handle, I think 100 is not quite enough, but I can handle 100. The benefit of people that are incumbents, I think, I can live with that. I still wanted to bring to attention, I would have liked to, if I would have thought about this, talk to the Maple Ridge people and to see what they did, and that would clarify me. But I totally understand the 100. We can improve enforcement. I think putting numbering signs and doing other things, that can be expend a little bit more money for sign, because the printer's got to put individually a number down, unless there's a sequencing something they do, and also putting a logo on that could scannable, that if you already have existing signs, that could be expensive to put a paste on. So all that stuff is interesting. We can improve enforcement. I think we're generally getting to a better discussion on what we want to do in the future. I think that's important as well. I used to call it sign pollution, but now maybe less signs would be very good. But yes, there's, regardless of whatever happens, there's always going to be an enforcement problem. And if we can reduce that and do something to improve that, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, on the amendment, I have Councillor Richter, Woodward, and Kunz. I hope I'm okay with that.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that what we're voting on here is limiting it to 100 signs with your name on it. So whether that's your name by yourself or your name with a group, it's 100 signs with your name on it. That's what we're voting on here?
That's right.
Okay. I'd like a follow-up question, because I know Councillor Ferguson had mentioned that he wants to move to eliminate the 16-foot signs, the 8x4 or whatever they are, the great big signs. Are you still planning to bring that amendment forward, Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, I was. Councillor Long wanted me to do one at a time. Yes, I am.
Okay, because it would seem to me that we would have the slates doing the 8x4, the huge signs, and again, that will disadvantage the other candidates. So I would support that amendment then, Councillor Ferguson. So thank you very much.
Okay, and we have Councillor Woodward on the amendment.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, on the amendment, I was actually speaking to the original idea. So what can I get what the amendment is?
100. You okay with that? Okay.
Oh, on the amendment down to 100. Okay, I thought there was another amendment there. Yeah, I think I wanted to bring forward, I think I mentioned in my initial comment, some concept around enforcement. So we're debating changing rules without discussing enforcement. So I don't really support a cap if the council's not going to support any sort of enforcement beyond what we have right now. So I suppose I can deal with that when the bylaw comes back council or it goes to the council table to get referred for a bylaw amendment. But I would prefer to save staff some time and not try to do it that way. So I won't move it, Councillor Long, but the idea would be maybe to table this one and have a debate around enforcement. Because if we're not requiring a deposit, we're not requiring we don't have any sort of mechanism to basically charge people that violate the bylaw flagrantly and blatantly. What's the point of putting in a cap? Because who's going to enforce it? You know, you put up 125 signs because you don't have any scruples. Who's going to do anything about that? So I don't support a cap, you know, unless we have some mechanism around enforcement. I'll probably support the cap, I guess, because maybe it's better than nothing. But again, it'll be people that have no problem violating the bylaw with an advantage over. So those of us that follow the rules. Thanks.
All right, those are fair comments. Now, I don't know if I can pipe up, but I mean, my mind started turning when we talked about 100, and the reason being, and I guess I'm taking my turn now, is that to speak, that 100 was something that could actually be counted, could be more easily managed. And I'm wondering if we agreed on a number like that, when you sign up as a candidate, you would receive 100 stickers or 100 authorization gadgets, which could be applied to your sign. Anyway, that's just a thought. I want to complicate.
Councillor Long, I want to jump in, but I did want to address that one comment, and then I'll stop. The problem with that, of course, is if I get a numbered stickers from the TOL with my name on them or whatever, or a candidate's name on them, and you put them on your sign, then those signs are stolen, because that will happen. Then now I have to run around and track down more stickers to put up my allowed 100 signs.
Well, I guess there's a situation can pop up anywhere, but that's a valid point. Okay, let's move on. We have Councillor Kunst, and then Blair for the second time.
So again, there's just always these unintended consequences of, you know, doing something like this. My thought was, well, if you're allowed to have 100 signs, then, you know, for some of those candidates who might want to put the biggest sign that is possible, are we going to limit the size of those 100 signs? Or are you going to have, like, you know, can you have 10 big signs and, you know, 90 smaller signs? So, you know, that would probably be something that we want to discuss, right? Because
currently there is no limit on this. There's a limit to the size, but not how many you can have at all at the moment. So
right. So what might happen then is, then instead of, you know, the small signs that people might want to then, okay, well, if I can only have 100 signs, then I'm going to make them the biggest signs possible, and then you have more sign pollution. So I don't know. I'm not sure if this is the way to go.
Part of it, but we've separated, so certainly that would be a discussion real quick, is the size after, if this passes. Okay, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think we're creating a more difficult situation for bylaws than they expressed to us originally. We're now adding all kinds of rules. We're going to have bylaws going around counting signs around the 300 square kilometers of the township. To see if we're within 100. It doesn't matter whether you allow 100, 200, 500, or 1,000. It still creates a problem. You can't enforce it without extraordinary cost and time. It is 3 weeks, and we have campaigns. Some people choose to use a lot of social media. Some people choose to run events. Some people choose to do more signs. It should be up to the individual candidates to campaign the way that they're able to. We already have a lot of restrictions on signs. We already make it difficult for bylaws, and to add more restrictions to bylaws when we can't actually enforce it makes no sense. So I will not support these restrictions. Again, it makes sense intuitively until you actually start to figure it out, and then it no longer makes sense. So I won't support any restrictions on number of signs.
Councillor Richter, we're at a minute to midnight here.
Okay, yeah, I was going to move an extension on the meeting, please.
Okay. And the seconder, to what time? 1 o'clock?
For an hour, till 1 o'clock, yeah.
Seconder? Seconder? Councillor Davis? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed? Councillor Whitmarsh is opposed? Are you?
Okay, so we're extending for an hour now? All right. And I would like to speak to the thing. I actually don't think it should be an unlimited number of signs. I don't think that that's an equal playing field. I think limiting the number of signs is an equal playing field. And I think that it's important that we be fair to all candidates. Limiting it to 100 signs to each candidate is fair. And I'm pretty sure if there's more than 100 signs that a candidate has up, the other candidates will call in saying there's 100 signs more. But just to go back to the comment made about enforcement, I think we are going to have to do something around enforcement, such as was suggested in the report that originally came to us from Mr. Wilson, that we put in a $500 fee. I'm not sure $25 per sign is enough to cover our staff costs, so we might want to lift it to $50 per sign. So if staff are picking up your signs, you're going to have to pay $50 to get them out of Hawk and put them back up. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call the vote, but I wanted to add a comment. I think that we are going to talk about, if this passes, enforcement and size of the signs. But I think 100 being such more of a manageable number on public property, we could get some kind of a barcode or some kind of an authorization sticker. I understand there's always going to be some people that will, break the rules. But
I don't think we need to get into barcodes right now, Councillor Long. Let's just vote on this and move forward.
That's my opinion, that if we do accept this amendment to 100, I think there are more manageable ways to work with it than there was with the 300. So that's why I'm in favor of the 100 versus the 300. And that's what we're voting on right now. So all in favor of 100 versus 300. Opposed? Councillor Kunst, Councillor Whitmarsh, and Mayor Froese opposed. Okay, that passes. Now on the main motion, can we vote on that? That's been amended to 100?
No, because Councillor Ferguson wanted to put another amendment in terms of the size of the signs.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that.
Just hold on, sorry, I don't want to call point of order, but before you take another amendment, I thought we had agreed to vote. I'm just going to move division if you do it that way.
No. Thank you, Councillor Woodward. We had said at the beginning, Councillor Ferguson, that would be two separate motions, that we're going to deal with the number first, then we're going to have a motion to deal with the size and other things. So we're only talking about.
To clarify, because Councillor Long, you said one thing. You said the limit of 100 on public property. Is that the intent of the motion, or is it 100 in total?
Okay, I said on public property because that's what it says with the Maple Ridge one. Number of election signs per candidate per location on public property. So it was public property, was I was talking, because private property, we're letting anybody do what they wish.
Okay, so we'll set off another round of private property. So no, I don't think that'll work I don't think that'll work either, because again, it'll end up saying you can do as many as you want as long as you put them on private property. Thank you.
We are talking about the motion now that's been amended to be 100 signs on public property. Councillor Quince, you'd like to speak to that before we vote on the main motion?
So what we're saying is that it'll be 100 signs on public property, but as many as we want on private property.
Well, we're not discussing private property at all, because in this particular motion, I don't know if we can limit people on private property. Maybe we can.
This is, fair enough, but this is why this is going to be so challenging for our bylaws, because then they'd have to determine, I mean, I just see this as going to be a real big pain in the butt, unless it was just, we have 100 signs, because then again, we can have some candidates with many signs on private property and 100. I don't know. I just don't see that this is the best route to go. So sorry.
Private folks want to put up signs. That's during an election. I think that's democracy in motion. We would only be concerned about enforcing signs on public property, which is now being proposed at 100, which is far more manageable. But the whole discussion on private
point of order, I feel I have to raise this because there was no reference to on public property in the amendment that we just voted on. I asked for the amendment, I asked for clarity, and it was 100 signs with your name on it. That's what I thought I voted on and what was passed. There was no reference to on public property, and I don't think sticking on public property in after the motion's been voted on is a correct procedure.
Ms. Bauer, because we're going by the attachment, at least I was, that we received with the memo of May 17th, which is today, that shows other jurisdictional election sign requirements and restrictions. Councillor Ferguson referenced Maple Ridge a number of times, and I actually was involved with the first motion, which was referencing Maple Ridge. And in the Maple Ridge's bylaw, it says public property. So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, but it was.
No, it wasn't clear, and that's not what I think we voted on.
Okay, what does the committee like to do about that?
As I understood it, when it was clarified by you, it did not include on public property. It included 100 signs with the candidate's name on it.
That's
Yeah.
the amendment.
That's what we voted on, yes.
That's the amendment, but when the main motion was put forward, Ms. Bauer, with the reference to Maple Ridge.
No, again, no, we're amending this after the fact. This is not right, or we're changing it.
No, I understood the main motion was 300 signs per individual.
You don't remember any reference to Maple Ridge?
Unfortunately not, and
Well,
to be clear, we wouldn't normally just include as per Maple Ridge.
Who seconded this, then, by the way? I made the motion.
Actually, the original motion was made by Councillor Ferguson. You seconded.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson, you better clear this up, please.
I'm glad you asked. I mean, I am a big believer I don't want a mucky bylaw here. I want it to be very clear. I think it's 300 per candidate. You know, like the old days, used to be issued stickers, and you'd have so many stickers. That'd be it. So the thing, 300, your name, that public property and private property, 300 with your name on it, and that actually hopefully clears it up very well. And also, lots being said about enforcement. You know, I just got a response from one of the councillors from Maple Ridge, and they've had it 2 elections now. And I'm not sure what this thing means here, but I think per candidate, public or private property. That's it. That's the way we should do it. I don't care about the rest.
And that's what we voted on, because it was.
I just wanted to know if it worked or not.
Okay, I'd like all of this committee to concur then that that's what happened. We'll take the direction of everybody's memory. But Councillor Ferguson, would you mind texting back to Maple Ridge and ask them what they do?
I can try, but I mean,
what's
it's
the
taken
point of
20
that?
minutes to do that.
All right, whatever, because
I don't think that matters.
So the motion that we amended was 300 signs total with your name on it. And then that came down to 100 signs total with your name on it. Total meaning private and public property.
hopefully this is going to go to a council meeting before anything's ratified, so we can argue it out again. But that is my understanding. Is anybody have different understanding than that other than myself? And I'll pass to whatever the council already say. So we're comfortable with that, even though we may or may not support the main motion. But the ruling is that we are talking about a total of 100 signs township-wide. Any objection?
With your name on it.
Yes. Can we make the vote on that now? Or would you like
We did. Oh, you're wanting to vote on the amendment of it. Okay.
Been amended. We're now back to the main motion.
Okay.
Are we ready to vote on the main motion? All in favor? Opposed? One, two, three. Did the clerk?
Everybody's required to vote, Councillor Hall. That's your issue there.
Yeah, well, I guess I voted in favor. So it passes.
If you could please clarify those opposed, please.
Okay, all opposed. Woodward, Whitmarsh, Froze, and Kunst. Well, it passes. Okay. Now what would you like to do? And I guess it's
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, did we get the 4x4, the 16 square feet?
No,
I would so move that.
Okay, what exactly are you moving, Councillor Ferguson?
The maximum size would be 16 feet square, which is 4x4, or I guess division thereof.
So the maximum size is 4x4 signs. That's what we're
Yeah,
voting.
That's
I
correct.
will second that.
Okay, before we do, I want to be clear now because I'm going back to the chart. So our chart says currently no more than 3 meters square. So which is 32.3 square feet. You're saying 16 square feet. I wonder how many.
Yes, sir.
That is. I don't know why it would say square. And then it says not exceeding a maximum height of 6 feet. So are you keeping that?
Yeah, that's in the main motion. That's in our main bylaw.
Clear what the motion is, so we don't have any discrepancy later.
Well,
So-
mine's in and the rest is in the main bylaw.
So the motion is to reduce it to 16 square feet, and the rest stays the same.
Why can't it just be simple, no more than 4x4 or 16 square feet?
That's correct.
Wouldn't go
Yeah.
4x4 because you could make it whatever size you want, right? Right? So it's square feet that we're talking about. Madam Clerk, do you have that?
I would require some clarification. It can be 4x4 and 16 feet, or it can be 4x4.
No,
or it
it's-
can be 16 feet.
No.
15 square feet. I just want to make sure I understand. So are we talking that it is a 4x4 sign,
No.
or are we talking that it is a 16 square foot sign?
16 square feet is what the mover said,
Okay.
Yeah.
and he was
No.
leaving of the bylaw in terms of the height.
Actually, believe it or not, Madam Clerk, our own bylaws even confusing, no larger than 3 meters square, and that could be a number of permutations mathematically as well. So maybe it's best to say no larger than 4x4, 4 feet by 4 feet, to a maximum of 16 feet squared. That would be even more clarifying than an existing bylaw.
No, that's not right, because that means you're restricting the shape of the size now, never mind the size of it. We're trying to, I believe that you're regulating the size, so you need to.
No, I'm actually helping out mathematically. Ours says 32.3, but that could have many
Because
permutations
it's
as well.
one's in meters and one's in feet. That's where the mix-up is. Our motion is, or at least the motion I thought I seconded, was a maximum size of 4 feet by 4 feet, which is 16 square feet.
That's correct. That's my motion.
Well, that's not gonna work. What if you had a sign that's 2 feet by 16, by 8 feet?
No, that's not, it's
That's not good.
4 feet by 4 feet.
I can see why you didn't want to chair these committees last time, the council member, but,
Maybe I should have.
I don't think you could, now you're talking about changing the shape. I like to have round signs, okay? What if my sign is round? How does that?
As long as it stays within the 4x4, it could be round.
The key was as
around-
long.
Hey, somebody want to challenge the chair? I think we stick with 16 square feet, and whatever it is, but of course it can't be over 6 feet tall. So that takes care of a 2 or a 1 by 16-foot sign, which is another one I think it should make, because it's long. So we're going to stick with the 16 square feet. If there's any objection, you have to challenge the chair, and I'm happy to step down.
Yeah, I challenge the chair. The motion said 4 feet by 4 feet for a maximum of 16 square feet. That's what I thought I seconded.
That's moved and seconded, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, let's vote on it.
Hold on. Are you sure? Can't we talk about it? I need to talk about it. Sorry. I don't know if I'm jumping the queue here on anybody else. Now that you said you'd step down, maybe we should kick you out of there. But no, I don't want to do it. But it does, I can see the quandary this is getting us into. I don't know if that's the right word or not, because you're when Councilor Richter says a maximum of, that means that by saying that, you're actually technically saying it could be any size within the maximum, not just 4 by 4. You have to, if you say the sign should be 4 by 4, you leave it at that. But the minute you say a maximum of 16 square feet, well, that breaks it open and says, well, in my mind, that says, well, a maximum, because I think Councillor Whitmarsh I've got one of his old signs in the hay shed here, and it was an odd shape. It was an odd shape. It wasn't 4x4. I picked it. No, I picked it up 2 years ago or 2 elections ago. It was in the ditch, and maybe I should have left garbage where garbage should be. Okay, anyhow. But you see what? And I measured it, and it was a unique sign, but it was within the guidelines.
Within.
I measured it, but I'm just so we either got to stop at 4x4, or if once you say 16 square feet, that means you can then do it whatever shape you need. Okay, but that's not really what I want to talk about. What about other affiliated groups? Because some groups put up 4x8 signs, and like, is this just for us running, or for politicians running in the election, or is this? I'm just going to say this: is it like the firemen? They put up a sign. Other people put up signs. Is that, even though it's a political sign, does that fall in their umbrella?
Madam,
I don't think I want to shut down this vote because we can't figure out whether it's just 4x4 or 16 square feet. I think if it's going to be both, then we could, then you, like you say, you can make it 1x6 or whatever. And because anyhow, I've complicated things, but I'd like an answer. Is this just for participants in the election, or is this for other people to put signs up? Does anybody know that question?
Madam Clerk, we're saying election signs, right?
Well, there's election signs that are from other people.
Put up election, I am assuming.
I believe election signs would cover signs put up by other organizations.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, I don't think we had that many signs that were that big, so I'm not sure this is a bylaw to address. I have my sign was 4x5, Councillor Davis, and it was an odd shape, so that's 20 square feet. That was the large signs that I had. So, to go down to 16 square feet, that's cutting the size of the sign in half. That seems a fairly significant measure. But regardless of what the number is, I would prefer probably 20 or 24 square feet. I think we should have it at square feet. Allow the candidate the choice to decide what shape their sign is. Do we really want to regulate shape of signs? We are adding so many new things to our bylaw. This is getting crazy. So let's just pick a number. I'd like 20. If you want 16, we'll go for it. But let's not tell people what shape they have to have for their sign.
Thank you, Mayor Froese.
Yep, thank you. I think just to clarify, I'd like to move an amendment to make it 16 square feet maximum.
Second. The amendment is to remove the 4x4 and just have it 16 square feet. Who's going to second that? Council Whitmarsh is seconding that. Okay. Only on the amendment then. So the amendment is clarifying that the main motion talks about square footage only, not about the shape, although there is a requirement in the existing bylaw that it can't be over a certain height, so that my 1x16 signs will not be allowed. All right, on the amendment, any discussion that we must have on the amendment, or can we please vote on it? Are we ready to vote?
Ferguson, I got one.
On the amendment?
Yes, of course.
Please.
Okay, proceed. Thank you. Okay.
Well,
are you by there? You got me speaking?
Is that okay, Councillor Woodward? Because you had your hand up earlier. All right. Councillor Ferguson on the amendment only.
Amendment only. Okay. I actually, looking at this thing, I'm being a mathematics teacher, I actually found a flaw in our own bylaw. The 32, people say 32 feet square means you could have a 2 foot by 16. That's 32 feet square as well. So I'm trying to get away from these big signs. So mathematically, I'm just looking at a number. And that's why I said 4x4 and a maximum of 16 feet square. So the point is that means you're not going to get past 4. So you can have a circle in that 4x4, or you can have smaller signs. A lot of people have smaller signs. That all I'm doing is trying to get away from these 6 feet, 8 feet, and I guess you could, in our existing bylaw, have 16 feet. So
No.
the point is, that's what I'm doing from a mathematical, practical point of view.
I was very clear in the beginning to try and clarify your motion, and you said the rest of the bylaw is to stay the same. According to the chart that I have, it says cannot exceed a maximum height of 1.8 meters. So that would discount any idea of what you're talking about these big tall signs. So that's
No, it didn't. What you could have, that's not going to exceed. You can have it 2 feet high. You could have it 2 feet by 16 feet, 2 feet high.
Yep.
It's three-dimensional. Anyway, I'm just giving you, I'll get a lesson in mathematics.
On the amendment, anybody else? Councilor Victor, are you speaking to the amendment, which is to redo?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with Councillor Ferguson. I don't want 16 feet by 2 feet. It's the 16-foot signs that create a differentiation that unlevels the playing field. So I think Councillor Davis was right when he raised the question about what exactly we thought we were voting on. It goes to intent here. The intent of what I thought was the biggest sign we would ever see in Langley is no bigger than 4 feet by 4 feet. And I think that's what Councillor Ferguson moved. So changing it to a maximum of 16 square feet changes the intent from 4 feet by 4 feet to could be this long by this long, or by that high. So I'm not supporting the amendment.
All right, well, let's take the vote. I guess I'll make a comment. I think it's the whole discussion today is limiting candidates' abilities to campaign in creative ways. So I don't think that making everything 4 by 4 is going to make the community look that much prettier, but maybe that's what the council feels. I think the 16 square foot is far more reasonable, and so I will support that. So let's vote on the amendment, which is to change it to 16 square feet in any dimension, but you cannot exceed the height because that's already in the bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? Let me get this down. Okay, wait a minute. Kim Richter, Councilor Richter, Ferguson, Arneson, opposed. So that carries. Okay. Whew. Right. So now we have a restricted size. We have a restricted number. Where do we go from here? Councilor Woodward, please help out.
I'm not sure I'm going to be very helpful. I'm still wondering who's going to enforce these restrictions. So I think that's something that I'm still stuck on. I think, of course, we can debate this further at council table or actually at readings of an amended bylaw. So I'm not too concerned about getting everything right this second. But we're putting a lot of restrictions in place that, again, I don't see any path to enforcement. Can't even, in my opinion, just my opinion, don't see sufficient enforcement for the rules we already had. So now we're putting in more rules in place. Someone's going to be running around counting signs. I can guarantee you there'll be campaigns that won't limit themselves to 100 signs. We're going to have staff running around counting signs now. So we're putting in a bunch of changes that, again, no path to enforcement. We've just eliminated from what I've seen, third-party groups now can't put a sufficient size sign out. Candidates that had odd-shaped signs, they're now being have to be replaced. So I don't see really what this has kind of gone sideways, in my opinion. Really has. All I really wanted was some enforcement, some enforcement with some teeth to it, so the taxpayer wasn't paying to police campaigns. We're putting a bunch of more rules in that a lot of people just aren't going to follow. So again, I think this really has gone sideways a little bit. While I would prefer maybe a blanket ban now, because the way this has gone, because we're putting rules in place that just aren't going to be enforced.
Okay, is it my turn now? Councillor Long? I can't hear you, Councillor Long.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify where we are. So we had an amendment that was was passed, which is 16 square feet rather than 4 by 4. So I think we're still discussing now the main motion, right? We already have a motion about the 100 signs, which is all you get. And now this is a motion on the size only. So the discussion needs to be on the main motion, from what I can gather, which is only on restricting the size, which is basically reducing it from 32.3 square feet to 16 square feet. So any more discussion on that?
I think, yeah, okay.
So Rick, did you want to speak to the main motion?
No, I wanted to put something forward about enforcement. I thought we were done with this because it was a separate motion.
Well, I think we can do enforcement on both the motions that we passed as a separate motion. So this is strictly on the size. Ferguson?
So what, are we voting? Are we voting on the main motion as amended the second time to the 16?
It was amended a second. No, it was only amended once. The motion apparently was made to 4x4, 16 square feet. Mayor Froese made a motion to take out the 4x4, make it strictly 16 feet. That passed.
Okay. So now we're going back to amend the main motion to a maximum of 16 square feet. That's what we're voting on now?
Been amended, so now we're voting on it.
Okay.
Is that right, Ms. Bauer? Help?
That is correct. We're voting on the main motion as amended.
Any more discussion on the main motion? Councilor Davis?
No, I have discussion too, Ferguson.
Okay.
Okay, so Davis too. I'll let David go first.
Okay, Steve, I want you to think about what you said an hour ago. You said you were going to put an elephant on. Can you put an elephant on 16 square feet? Okay, I'm ready to vote.
Small elephant. Okay.
Yes, I can. That's a good question. Also, there was this comment, Councillor Davis, you made a while ago about people putting signs on your property. I think quite a few years ago, I think I had one stapled.
Okay, we're only talking about the size now.
Davis did. Okay, we're getting crazy. Mr. Chair, I did want to say that I just thought about that. I should use an example. I should have brought a 4x8 piece of polyglass or whatever they call that, and I should have cut it in sheets, and then shown the example that you can have with this new 16 square foot. You can have 2x8s, and they actually come out. And that's why I'm trying to get away from these crazy large signs.
I don't know.
And anyway, that's my personal point. I think it's just wrong.
Okay, a friend of mine who's now passed away. I don't know if you guys remember. I should mention his name. He made me a sign that was 1 foot by 12 feet. Bob Long for council, but he didn't spell councilor correctly. I still put the sign up because he did so much work on it, and I thought it was the most unique sign. But then I also put it on city property, so that poor sign was jinxed from the beginning. I think I might still have it. We're going to call the vote on the size. All in favor? Opposed? Woodward, Froese, Ferguson, you opposed it? You made the motion.
I want the 4x4. I don't want the 1x60.
Ferguson. Okay, I have Woodward, Froese, Ferguson. Anybody else opposed? Then it passes, right? Okay.
I believe Councillor Kunst was also opposed.
Were you opposed, Councillor Kunst? Thank you. So there's the 4 opposed, so it still passes. Well, it's going to be a whole nother deal when it comes to council. We're going to go over it all again, I'm sure. All right, anything else? What would you like to do next, council?
Adjourn?
Yeah. Well, we have till 1 o'clock. I don't know if we got all our business done or
Okay,
not.
I have another motion that I'd like to put forward.
Okay, just before you do, in all fairness, because I'm trying to watch the thing, Councillor Woodward put his hand up first, although now it's down again. Did you want to speak, Councillor Woodward, or Councillor Richter's going to put a motion?
Well, I'm happy to defer for additional. I think that maybe if there's other amendments or restrictions that council's looking for, we could discuss enforcement at the end of that. Maybe in context of the new rules, so that, or the new motions that have passed here, so council, so staff can get back to me with some ideas. Maybe it's better to get all those on the table first and then discuss enforcement at the end.
Yeah, because I do have that on the list as something to discuss as enforcement.
Okay, so just as a point of clarification, we're going to come back to enforcement because that was what I was going to put a motion on about now. I can hold off.
We could go to enforcement now. It'd be good because we only have a half an hour left of the extended time.
All right, I will move the recommendation of Mr. Wilson to require a $500 refundable fee for the placement of signs. But I would like it to be that a $50 fee be deducted for each sign that has to be collected by township staff.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councilor
You know, for talking, I'll second it.
It's been seconded by Councilor Woodward already. So, okay, we're talking about the $500 deposit and a $50 fee for each one. Discussion on that, I think.
Well, it's my motion. Can I speak to it first? Yeah. I just want to say that I agree with what Councillor Woodward is saying, that we need to have some sort of teeth now in the enforcement instead of banning signs, which is what I wanted to do in the first place, so we wouldn't have to worry about enforcement. But now that we do, I think we need to make it financially important that campaigns keep track of their signs and the positioning of their signs. And this will do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Whoever is speaking is, we're not listening. We're not hearing you.
Okay, who's next? I have Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, I mean, I think this is needed regardless of the earlier proposed changes that council will, I guess, have staff looking into at a council meeting now. This was needed for key intersections, boulevard placement, location adjacent to corner intersections, people just placing signs where they're not permitted, and then really nothing happening about it. So do campaigns have to stop campaigning, run around the township and report every individual sign bylaw violation? So I think where I was headed with this is deposit's certainly helpful. Money talks, I guess, to some extent. But I would actually want to switch from complaint-driven enforcement to proactive enforcement when it comes to campaign signage. And that will stop the problem. People, if the signs are removed proactively and not everybody has to run around and complain to drive all over the township, I think that's where this needs to head, or there'd be some campaigns that just won't follow even the existing rules, let alone the new ones. Now we can perhaps supply every bylaw officer with a tape measure. They can go out and measure every sign now too. Because I think that is what we need to start looking at, which is enforcement, proactive enforcement, not complaint-driven enforcement specific to this election sign bylaw.
Okay, thank you. I have Councilor Davis next.
Okay, you know, I understand where this is going. I, for one, when I went to high school, I was a bad kid. They made me pick up garbage at Fort Langley Junior Secondary. That's what I did at lunchtime. I picked up garbage. I did that all day long. I pick up garbage today. I walk, and at the election, when I pull my signs up, some of them go missing in certain spots. And it's uncanny how I think, where is that sign? That's my soldier. I'm worried about it. And it's unbelievable. 2 months, 3 months, 4 months later, I'm driving my tractor down the road and I have the vision to look down the ditch. And that's where I saw Councillor Whitmarsh. She said, but I pick up a lot of signs. Bob, I've got a few of yours. In the old, there's probably 6 inches of them, and I should bring them back. But I figure that if I keep them in there, then they won't get up at the election. You might not get in. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going stupid.
They're good for flooring in the barn.
No, but my point is, I picked up just about everybody's signs. Well, I gotta watch what I say there, but I do. If I see a sign there, I think, well, that's part of our. I'm a politician. I'm going to pick that sign up. I'll stop. I have my kid climb down the ditch and pick the sign up. We take it home. We throw it in the pile. And I've returned some of them, but some of them get pretty beat up. And I'm concerned that somebody might come along, throw the sign across the street. It may not be able to be kept in track of. And if it gets up to bylaws, now it costs $50. Now, is that a fine to say, hey, we have one of your signs. We discarded it. You owe us $50, or if you want the sign back, if you don't want the sign back, you get $50. But if you come and pick it up, like, how does that exactly work? And this could be a nightmare, because there's people that run for council. Well, some of them don't even put up a sign, and maybe I look back and think maybe if we did get rid of the signs, it'd be a lot easier. But I do have a lot of signs and that I've taken back and I've given back to people, and they were thrown up in the pile up at Murrayville in the police station there. You know, no, not the police station, the fire hall 3, I think, in Murrayville.
The work shard.
Yeah, the work shard, and we used to put them up at the fire hall in Brookswood.
The Brookswood Fire Hall.
Yeah, and I know not everybody touches everybody else's sign. I'm not afraid to pick up the sign and take it up and throw it up there and say, well, listen, it was in the ditch. And generally I see them. I can tell you where Megan Dykeman's 2 or 3 signs are right now that were too dangerous to stop. So anyhow, okay. I know where this is going, but we are, what's that saying? We are weaving a web here that, but anyhow, thank you for your time.
All money in this book. Thank you. Councilor Ferguson?
Yes, I think Councillor Davis said it quite well. I think I've been known to pick up signs and take them up to either the work yard and the old days, the fire hall. And actually, some of you, if you want your signs back, I got some of them that I picked up with my own. Councillor Long, I've got some of your signs and a few other councillors. Anyway, yeah, I think that, I don't want to feel as if we're being too punitive for people, but I do want to talk about enforcement as well. So I guess that will come at a subsequent motion. Thank you.
This motion touches on enforcement, but it's all about the $500 and the $50 is what we're discussing right now. Okay, and Councilor Quinst.
Yeah. So, do we know if there is an orientation that happens with candidates' campaign? Because I think, that might help with the rules. Especially if now we're changing the rules. If we can provide an orientation session that hopefully each candidate can provide one person that will be able to share the rules with their team, so that we don't have candidates placing signs, on school grounds, for example, at the very beginning of a campaign, or, that sort of thing. So if we could sort of, highlight the rules right out of the gate. And I'm not so sure having, fines for people is gonna, I just see lots of problems, with people wanting to, maybe make it worse for another candidate by, making their sign, I don't know. I don't think I can support it. I just want to be fair to all the candidates. And, some people don't have a lot of money to run a campaign. And there might be some people that are going to try to, sabotage another person's campaign just because they know that they can do that, and it'll hurt them financially. So we have rules in place. We have bylaws. I think we can just carry on with the 3-week campaign. And, I guess I have a lot more faith in people than maybe some people here on council do, that, for the most part, it's okay. It's not perfect, but it has worked. And yeah, you're gonna always have people that are gonna, like, some break the rules, but I like, for the most part, I think the system works. So I don't know, those are my comments.
I'll make a comment, if you don't mind, and then it's Councilor Arneson. But if we in fact ratify the decisions we've made thus far, reducing the size of the signs and incredibly reduce the number. I talked in the very beginning, several hours ago, about education being a huge part, which I agree with you, Councillor Quince. I think we need to issue brochures or something, have the candidates really be clear on what these new rules will be. I do believe that people will obey them. I think at 100 signs, it's very much easier to keep a track on them. As Mayor Froh says, there's a cost of doing the election. So if bylaws have to get out and work a little harder during that time, and we have to scrutinize the complaints that come in. And I think the other thing is that we're all, I believe, somewhat influenced by and I'd call it disaster from the last election, because during 6 weeks you couldn't do anything. So a lot of the comments that Councillor Woodward is talking about, I think, came because there was such a long period of time, signs going up and down and all over the place, that it was so hard to manage. If we are now sticking with 21 days, we now have severely limited the number of signs, I think the problem is going to be minimized considerably with these changes. And if we have to do some extra work during those 21 days, so be it. We almost should hire election police. I don't know. The other thing is, I think that seeing how we are discussing the $550, I think that administratively that is going to be more of an issue than any enforcement. You're going to take these deposits, you have to keep track of which ones are legitimate. There'll be all kinds of complaints to how that sign got picked up. I think people will be more cautious of what happens to the signs if they're only supposed to have 100. It could be numbered, issued with stickers. That's a whole other issue. But I don't think that this $500 and the $50, is going to be, I don't think anyone's going to pay $50 to get a sign back. Secondly, the $500 is going to be a challenge, I think, for a lot of candidates, or it should be, for the small candidates that don't really want to put that kind of money out. And administratively, it's going to be an accounting disaster. So I'm not in favor. I think that we've done enough to solve the problem already, and let's leave the money part out of it. That's my opinion. And Councillor Arneson, you're going to get almost the last word.
Uh-oh, I better make it good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make my comments brief. I'm concerned, actually, I think as some other councillors could be, that there would be a disproportionate effect if we were to put these different costs onto individuals. And it's been my experience, so I'll do a mea culpa. I had some signs that were misplaced in the last election, and I dutifully went to go where I knew where they were. And I consistently saw, especially towards the end and after, in the aftermath, when people didn't win, they totally left their signs sitting there. So I'm not really too sure that this whole strategy is going to get us where we want to be. I think that there's some pragmatism. Also, further to what Councillor Long is saying, is that what's the value of a sign? Why would I pay the township $50, to get my sign back if that's what the deal is, when in fact I could get 2 signs for that as a coroplast sign? So I'm not really in favor of doing this. I think I agree in principle that the scope of limiting the numbers will be helpful, because my other concern is how much are we going to spend in staff time to administer this whole thing? I know we want to get some cost recovery, but is this really an effective model to pursue that? So I don't think I'll be able to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You haven't spoke to this, so here you go.
I don't think this is a very effective way to try and recover our resources. Everything we've done in the meeting today is to create more bureaucracy, more rules, and cause more expense to our budget. So we've done nothing to bring the cost down. We've only actually increased the budget, increased the cost of running the election, and now we want to try and charge people to make that recover. We're going to have more staff time than it's worth. So I don't support this initiative either.
Thank you. So we've all spoken, and can we call the vote then on the 550? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. Whitmarsh, Long, Arneson, Ferguson, Davis, Froze, and Kunst opposed. All right. So we've discussed enforcement. We've discussed the size, the number of signs. Ms. Powell, would you like to guide me? Can we call this meeting over now? Have we got enough?
I have my hand up, Councillor Long.
Oh, okay. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, so I did give you the heads up on, now that we've determined that there will be no deposit and no recovery, at least at this particular meeting. I wanted to, and I'll word it however staff suggests, not being an expert in the bylaw enforcement, to switch from complaint-driven enforcement to proactive enforcement. I don't believe it should be incumbent upon the public or other campaigns to be driving all over the place, reporting individual signs, to have them sit there for days, and then just put back up when staff do get around to getting them down during an election. So they just reappear magically the next day. So I would like to switch to proactive enforcement for the signage election bylaw.
Okay, now, Mayor Froze, you could help me, Mr. Back, and anybody. We are at a committee meeting, so I don't know if we can actually give direction for reports and stuff. Maybe we can. Could we, seeing how this is going to have to come back to council regardless, and I'm sure that'll be a really interesting meeting. Could staff respond to Councillor Woodward's concern, which I think maybe is shared by others here, how they enforce, seeing how we didn't pass the $500 thing, which was in the staff report. Could staff come back with a memo or something, Mr. Backen, can you help us out, that would help council make its decision when it comes to council. And I guess the real
Well, point of order, you didn't even call for a seconder. So if there's a seconder, which I intended to second, wouldn't we be discussing the motion and you would need to make a referral to staff if that's what you wanted to do?
Well, no, that's what I was getting clarification on, of what the authority of this committee is to order report. Maybe you could repeat again, Councilor Woodward. Did you not ask for a report?
No, what I was suggesting was my intent, and then letting you sort it out with staff to see what form that might take. So my intent is to switch, to get the terminology right, and for this particular bylaw, have proactive enforcement and not rely on campaigns with the public to file individual complaints per sign.
So I would like to support Councilor Woodward asking staff to help us with how we would get down this road, right? Mr. Backen.
Well, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is really a recommendation to council. So it would be simply be phrased that the committee recommends to council that we engage in proactive enforcement of all election-related matters, and well, basically that would be it. And if there was to be a referral of that, it would be referred to staff if there was to be some questions. But I think the motion is really to move away from complaint-driven to upon being seen to actually deal with it. So I think it's fairly clear.
Thank you. Excellent. So the Councilor Woodward, you have made that then as a recommendation to council, and Councilor Richter, were you seconding that?
Yes, I am seconding that.
That's that in the time we have left.
So I think, Councilor Long, I'll speed it up. I think I've spoken to it a couple of times. So just very briefly again, the process right now is, you have to file an individual bylaw complaint for a sign at a T intersection, for example, or on a tree boulevard, or on a sidewalk, or any sort of other location, proximity to an intersection. You have to file an individual bylaw complaint for that. I find that to be a bit onerous. I don't think it's sustainable. You're going to have a bunch of people driving all over the place, finding bylaw, and then you have to follow up. Is it still there? And of course, it reappears by the selected campaigns that engage in that activity. So I think that that's the rationale for it. That for this particular bylaw only, I'm not asking for any change in enforcement regime, but for this limited period of time and for this bylaw, I believe enforcement should be proactive. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Councilor Ferguson on the referral suggestion that's.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think it's a good point that Councilor Woodward bring it to our attention. But I also wanted to ask. I know I'm going through the stuff that's provided for us. I'm rereading it, and we haven't had anything from the clerk, or I know Mr. Wilson not here, about what do we do during an election and how effective is it? If I may, through the chair, and maybe Ms. Bauer can answer it. Maybe she could say, well, we got 10 phone calls, we got 5 complaints, we sat on our head, we went for lunch a lot. I don't know, just to be humorous here, but I mean, Ms. Bauer, do you have anything to say regarding the current enforcement policy that Township of Langley has regarding elections?
At this point, we don't have any statistics that were kept during the last few elections, but I can speak to the general process with Mr. Wilson as the election officer has been to first reach out to the candidate to say, hey, your sign is in the wrong place. We try and get it removed that way. Following that, the bylaw officers are contacted as they are out on the road, and they will go and pick up the signs as directed by Mr. Wilson.
So we do have some sort of a policy enforcement right now, and I know that Mr. Wilson and others in the past have been known to either phone me or email me or text message now as you better get out there and get your signs, because the crew is very happy picking them up. So, okay, I don't have any problem supporting Councillor Woodward's motion. I think we're doing an awful lot of it already, but I don't have any problem supporting it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to follow up. Appreciate that clarification, Councillor Ferguson. I think that highlights the problem perfectly. So we're going to have very experienced campaigns and very experienced campaign teams somehow putting signs at T intersections to then call them and wait a couple of days for them to go out there and look at it. Of course, it's still there, then it's removed, and then it's replanted the day after it's removed. So I think that highlights the problem. I don't think that process works. I think it, most people can read the bylaw and follow the bylaw. And if they don't, their sign can be picked up in Murrayville for free, apparently. So I think that highlights exactly why this change is needed. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Davis?
Hi, didn't dawn on me until Councillor Whitmarsh said that we are making this very complicated. Well, we're putting a lot of, this is a tough, I didn't realize this would be this much. We are, but I don't have a lot of problems with my signs, and maybe because I put them up, and I don't, not everyone has the ability to put them up, but to go proactive might be something that we can't handle either. It's going to cost a lot of money. Like the election is an unbelievable expensive thing, and I don't know if we're going to solve this today. This part of it that because I think the time to talk about this is when it comes back from staff. But I hope we're not I get upset that the signs reappear if maybe I don't pay enough attention to it. So I'm just wondering that everyone's got problems everywhere, and we're putting a lot of rules in here. Anyhow, I really would like to see this when it comes back. I would like to see this when it comes back, and I could talk a little more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmarsh. And this is a motion, a recommendation only, right? And it would come back to council.
Yeah, I think I certainly want to hear from staff on it and get more information on what that looks like compared to what we are doing. It does seem a bit odd to me that we have a bylaws department that is really a complaint-driven bylaws department, and here we are that we're now going to decide that of all the things that the bylaws officers do, the most important job they have will be every election is to go after election signs, that we're going to make that the priority, and they're going to become a proactive bylaws department for election signs, but complaint driven on all the other things we manage in the township. For me, election signs are not the most challenging issue that bylaws faces in our terms. There are many things they do that have nothing to do with the election signs, and I don't think we should prioritize their work and say election signs are your most important task. So I'm worried about that. I'm interested in hearing from staff for sure, but at this point, I'm not supportive of moving this way.
Okay, I'd like to say, I think that, as I mentioned in the last motion, that we've made a number of changes that should make it a little easier for proactive work. It's 21 days every 4 years. So I suppose if there were a bylaw that we would want our staff to enforce, this would be the only one we could probably do, because you don't want to go after any individuals or any initiatives in the community or any group or anything, but picking on on candidates, making sure they follow the rules. And when you look at the report that was sent to us in November 2018, it was the number one thing that that the elections officer reported on, was to somehow work on the tremendous amount of township resources that were spent in dealing with election signs. But remember, there were thousands of election signs that election, and a 6-week period. We're talking about much fewer if that motion passes at council of the 100 each, and only a 21-day time. Okay, we have speakers for the second time. Councillor Ferguson, or maybe second or not, I don't know.
Yeah, here I am. I'll call it second time. No, I think there's a lot of confusion. People are saying that we're making things complicated. I don't think this is making things complicated. I actually think we have an existing election procedure for looking after enforcement, and we're just going to beef that up a bit, if at all. We might already be doing all the things we need to do. Now, you could have it's like the police. Every quarter, people are still going to be committing crime. So we'll do the best we can with a better system. I think but I believe there's an awful lot going on. I also believe that candidates can be educated better. That's another simple thing.
Yeah.
They're volunteers. Volunteers make mistakes. They're volunteers. We can educate them. It's up to the candidate. And most of the ones that have to be regarding who's got the most signs or most money to spend, so to speak. Because I remember I've been to campaigns where one candidate had over 2,000 signs out there. Now, that wasn't last election, but it was over 2,000 signs, and they had those big 4x8s everywhere. And anyway, I don't like 4x8s, obviously. But the thing is, I think this is a big step, and we're not making things more complicating. We're improving a process, and we're moving forward. At least that's my point, my thoughts.
Very much.
Mr. Chair, I have to step out to attend another meeting, so I just want to let the clerk know. Thank you very much.
Do you want us to vote on this first? No.
We still have people speaking, so
We have 5 minutes left in the meeting, too.
Okay, so.
We only extended to 1 o'clock. Can we take the vote now?
Okay. Well, you've got 2. I'll wait another couple minutes.
Only if we've forgotten something, councillors. Otherwise, let's have a vote on this. We're going to beef up the enforcement. That's the recommendation to council. It'll be debated again when it hits council. Councillor Woodward, would you need to talk? Councillor Richter?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if the intent of this is to have bylaws go out and just pick up the sign, because the number one complaint that comes through during an election period, at least as far as I've ever concerned, is where the signs are. People hate those signs. I don't know why we didn't ban them. So I'm going to support this. It's worth a try.
Okay. Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I'm just going to add that was the intent. The intent is not to declare signage their only priority for a 3-week period and declare that the only priority of the bylaw department. I don't know where that came from. The idea is to try to level the playing field here from all campaigns. So we have, in my opinion only, we have some campaigns that flout the rules blatantly. And it's not about a poor volunteer or an uninformed candidate. These are signs that are removed and repeatedly placed in the same locations. And they're done at very specific times. And so it's about leveling the playing field for all campaigns, not those that are signage experts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll call the vote now. All right. So all in favor? Opposed? Kunst, Froze, and Whitmarsh opposed. And it passes. Okay, and we're 4 minutes to 1. Can we have a motion to terminate?
Termination.
Okay, second. Councilor Kunst, all in favor? Opposed? Well, who would be opposed? Thank you for your patience and understanding if you actually find it in your hearts to do that. And have a good day, and we'll talk to you all later.
You did a good job, Bob.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.